This is the only game in which it's sometimes better to be wrong than right. It's called Right or Wrong. And right here's the man who's seldom wrong, Clement Freud.
Thank you very much. On my left are Andre Melly and Anthea Askey, all set to do battle with John Cleese and William Rushton on my right. Let me briefly try and explain how this very simple game works. I ask a question, and the team which wants to answer buzzes or rings. Men buzz, women ring. If the answer is correct, and the other team agrees with them, then the first team scores 5 points. If the answer is wrong, it's wrong with such conviction the other team thinks that it's right. The first team scores 10 points. In other words, twice as many points when one team successfully misleads the other, which is the point of the game. You can get double for being right also, but only if the opposing team thinks that you're wrong. You'll see how it works as we go along. To add a little extra spice and confusion, each team has been given 4 answers. Only neither team knows which answers the other team has been given. Also, the point system is worked entirely by me, because we have small side bets on who's going to win. So in this atmosphere of mutual mistrust and confusion, here is the first question. In which city was the first parking meter installed?
It is with considerable
John
pride.
Cleese.
Oh, you say it with considerable pride.
Buzz.
No, you
The first buzzer.
You do it, Willie.
It was in our own fair city, the flurry of cities Orley, Chaucer, London.
William Rushton says London.
Who else could lead the
That's
world
right.
with such an
No,
alarming
wrong.
invention?
No, I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
5 points. It was not London.
Because it was Birmingham.
Birmingham?
No.
5 points,
No,
not Birmingham. The score's very level.
We'll do this one straight away because it's obviously the...
For 10 points.
It was obviously the city with the worst traffic problem, which is quite clearly Los Angeles. So that's the answer.
Los Angeles?
Yeah, it could be. I think it's America.
It's double bluff business there. Los Angeles, I should think. Right, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
Is right.
And as Los Angeles is wrong,
Oh, wrong.
and it was Oklahoma City, the boys get 20 points, because you get just as many points for giving the wrong answer, provided the other people are fooled into thinking it's the right answer. So the boys once more have shot into a commanding lead. They're now leading by 25-5. The next question. A person who believes that in the nature of things he can't know anything about what lies beyond is known as an agnostic. Who coined the word agnostic? Anthea Askey.
Well, oddly enough, I know this doesn't sound true, but it was a Mr. and Mrs. Gnostic and their daughter Agnes, and it was then cut down to agnostic. No, really, don't look at me like that. It's true.
No, not in a kind moment.
A pretty
even.
invention.
A pretty invention.
5
Do you want to do it or
points
should
the
I?
boys.
I'll do it. 'Cause I like saying it. It was the Venerable Bede.
William Rushton says the Venerable Bede.
Venerable. Oh, I didn't.
I only quote Venerable, and he's called that. I don't know what his habits were.
Which venerable?
The Bede. The Bede. I mean, the Bede.
The bead. The amber bead.
Who at the time was viewed as venerable.
No.
5 points. It was not the Venerable Bede.
It was Johnson.
No.
10 points. It was not Johnson.
Well, it's Greek, in fact, so I can... the Gnostics were a sort of pre-Christian sect who felt that the salvation in life was rewarded by knowledge, and that this was eventually declared an heretical sect by Pope Paul VI, who then said, and this view that it was a heretical sect was agnosticism.
He looks so innocent when he says it, doesn't he? Oh, I
think he's showing off. You know?
I think he's showing off. I think he knows because he's carrying on.
Such a long speech.
Baby blue eyes looking at you. Look at that.
Right, he's right.
20 points to John Cleese because it's wrong. T.H. Huxley in 1869.
No.
Bother.
Which we'd been given, so we never even had a chance.
Oh, serves you right.
And you were playing for more points.
We were playing for lots of points.
Well, I'm going to play you a tape. And I want you to identify who is making the noise. Actually, it should have been what is making the noise. Audrey Melly.
It's somebody jumping from about 4'10" into mud in Wellington boots and then walking along.
Very nearly, but actually
no jumping.
not. No jumping.
I don't think
no,
so.
wrong.
There are a number
wrong.
of people jumping, but not
5 points.
one.
He was not jumping Wellington boots, mud, 4'10".
How many people did you hear, Willie?
About 12.
12.
Mass mud wrestling, I suppose.
That's fish, isn't it? They wrestle in fish. No, I think Andre very nearly had it right. It's people not in Wellington boots. It's two chartered accountants in bare feet walking through mud.
As is their wont.
As is their wont.
At weekends.
No, I don't think it is.
I don't think so either.
10 points to the men because it is two people with bare feet walking in sloshy mud.
Oh, I'm glad I'm not married to him. He looks so innocent when he tells lies.
Mind you, he knew the answer, and you got pretty close to it, not knowing the answer, so it sort of looked dangerous. So the men have increased their lead. The girls are stuck on a pathetic score of 10 to the boys' 75. In the Mad Gardener song by Lewis Carroll, we read of an argument that proved someone was the Pope. But when he looked again, what did he find it was?
A letterbox.
William Rushton.
A letterbox.
Could it give us the reason for that answer?
Because if you're slightly short-sighted, the Pope looks quite like a letterbox. Mouthful of envelopes, because you know, more lifelike.
No,
it wasn't.
5 points.
It was.
You've added 50% to your total.
Oh, good.
Good.
It was an elephant. Because it goes, he thought he saw an elephant climbing up the rope. Oh, no, he thought he saw, it was a rope.
Indian Pope trick.
That's right.
Sounds very unlikely.
Very unlikely.
5 points.
I know this poem. I've heard it. Somebody used to read it to us at school. It's a whole series of verses about I looked at something and then I looked again and realised it was. And
Okay, I'll read you the poem and stop at the word that
very good.
He thought he saw an argument that proved he was the Pope. He looked again and found it was.
It does rhyme with Pope.
Has to rhyme. Letterbox did it? I hadn't realised that. I had to rewrite a few songs.
Do 5 seconds before nobody gets any more points.
A bar of toilet soap.
I think we'll give you 8 points. It's a bar of mottled soap.
Oh, that wasn't bad.
Ian is complaining about the 8 points because of his arithmetic. We'll give you 10 points. Which planet is next but one to the sun? Going which way? Going from the sun outwards, says Ian Messenger. And John Cleese says...
Venus.
No, I don't think it's...
No.
I don't think so.
No.
No, I think it's a cold.
Wrong.
Oh.
10 points. He was right.
Oh.
It is, of course, Venus. I have written down here all the other things it could not be. And it says Venus, the answer. So, a leap ahead. 35 points in the lead. I'm going to play you some music, and I want you to identify the vocalist.
I love gentle people will never ever let you down.
Anthea.
I think it's Dean Martin.
It's not somehow...
He hadn't taken the tablets when this one
hear
was
the
done.
words.
Right or wrong?
Wrong.
5 points.
It's a sort of sub-groaner, though, isn't it? I mean, it's not the actual the groaner himself. It's a sort of pseudo-being. It would probably turn out to be Quentin Hogg, but it was... I don't know. It wasn't Al Bowley. It was... What about somebody like Guy Mitchell?
What?
Guy Mitchell. He used to sing songs of that nature.
He did used to sing. But I don't
What
trust
about Guy
those
Mitchell?
two.
Wore red feathers and a hooly, that sort of thing. He used to sing
Yes,
that.
he did.
I think there was all that fuffle going on. I think he's right.
Yeah.
That's 10 points to William Rushton. It was Michael Holiday. But any name will do, provided you can convince the other side it's the right name.
Sorry.
Shall we hear it once more? Because I think it was very accurate. He is, I think, enormously a sub-groaner. Let's listen to him again.
I love those dear hearts and gentle people who live in my hometown, because those dear hearts and gentle...
Sounds like Bing Crosby to me. What is the national emblem of Japan? Andre Melly.
Rising sun.
Rising Sun.
It's the national newspaper.
That's a very difficult one, isn't it? So I think if it were that, I don't think we would have been given it by this crafty Mr. Messer.
I don't either. No,
I
it's a
think it's
devious
wrong.
mind. It's probably
Wrong.
grass or something like that.
5 points.
And we have
Not
to
the
find
Rising
something
Sun.
starting from the point of view that not knowing at all. So what's a good Japanese symbol?
Perhaps what you do, a Japanese symbol.
Japanese symbol. A bucket of blood.
Bucket of blood?
I don't think so.
No, it's...
5 points.
No.
It's not.
It is a kind of, what would they call those samurai's thing?
Sorry.
A samurai's thing.
Scimitar
Animal,
type
vegetable, or
thing.
mineral. No.
10 points.
No, it isn't.
Not.
It's actually a miniaturized transistor dragon. Made in Birmingham.
Might be a dragon, but
Yes, I think it's they do this now. They
Right
cut out the
or
real
wrong?
answer. It's a dragon which is right.
That's 20 points to William Rushton because it's a chrysanthemum.
Miniaturized, transistorized chrysanthemum.
Miniature transistorized chrysanthemum made in Leamington Spa. We now come with a score, girls 85, boys 165, to the weekly guest spot. Every week we invite one well-known human being to come along and give us a 1-minute potted biography of his life. And it's up to the teams to guess which is the deliberate mistake of which there is one. And today's guest is that well-known vegetarian bullfighter, Mr. Spike Milligan. We are ready when you are.
Right. I was born in 1918 in India as the son of Leo Alfonso Milligan and his wife Florence Mary Winifred, née Kittleband. At the age of 1, I was shipwrecked in the Red Sea. I made my first appearance at the age of 8 as a clown in a nativity play at the Convent of Jesus and Mary in Pune, India. In 1933, I came to England. At the beginning of the war, I signed on as a semi-skilled labourer at Woolwich Arsenal, and I played the trumpet in the jazz band on Saturday nights. I later joined the Royal Artillery. Bang! It went. Much louder. Bang! No, that's right. And I served in Tunisia and Italy. I got shell-shocked and met Harry Seacon. We started the Goon Show on radio in 1952 with Peter Sellers and Michael Bentine. That lasted for 6 years. I was on the TV. I was on the TV in a show called Fred, and later changed by Deed Poll to Son of Fred. And in 1961, concurrently, I played Ben Gunn in Treasure Island at the Mermaid Theatre and Mate in the Bed Sitting Room at the Duke of York's Theatre in 1963. Oblomov at the New Lyric Hammersmith in 1964, and son of Oblomov at the Comedy in the same year. I have written books called Pacoon, Silly Verse for Kids, A Dustbin of Milligan, Ridiculous Riddles, and Adolf Hitler, My Partner's Downfall. My favourite pastime is sleeping, brackets, question mark, bracket off. And I'd love to meet this typist. Right, the show is now wide open to conjecture.
Now, there's one actual...
Shut up. All right, go on then.
There's one actual deliberate mistake in this.
That's me.
You get 25 points for spotting it. You lose nothing for...
I spotted it already.
The wrong question. John Cleese.
Well, it's going to sound very obvious, but I don't really believe you were shipwrecked in the Red Sea at the age of 1. Does that count? Or
yes,
what?
I was.
You were, really?
Yeah, on the ship called the Erin Pura. All the stuff that sound normal here are the mistakes. And all the stuff yes, I was in the Red Sea called the Erin Pura, and it broke its back on the rocks, and we were taken off by Her Majesty's destroyer, the Tigris. The Tigris destroyer.
Okay, so that's wrong.
Meantime,
your father was not named Kitterbrand?
Well, he was not. He was not Leo. Was he Leo Alphonse?
Leo
was your father really Leo Alphonse? Because I don't.
Yeah, Leo Alfonso Milligan. His parents were Irish, and they were literate, and the only names they knew were the saints' names and the popes. So they lumbered him with the Pope Leo and Pope Alfonso. So he's lumbered. Leo Alfonso. You ought to hear my mother calling out, Leo! They expect a lion to come back. It's the truth. Yes, it's true.
I think it's something to do with dates, something sneaky like that, to do with the...
Never eat them.
The dates of the beginning of the Goon Show.
I don't know. I think it started in 1952, yes. It started in the Goon Show, and it says so here. Radio in 1952.
Okay, so that's wrong.
That's right.
I mean, the challenge is wrong.
She's wrong. Oh, yes.
The information is correct.
I don't know where they get these chairmen from. Spurt? We've both been accused of Finchley Labour Exchange this morning. Got here first, that's all.
I don't believe the semi-skilled labouring at Woolwich Arsenal, for surely such important stuff as shelling could not be done by a semi-skilled. You must have known your ammunition.
Well, I made semi-produced guns. They didn't fire.
For the opposition?
We sold them to the Grenadier Guards, and they have never been seen since. Today, their captain is Shirley Temple and living in the south of France at Bayonne. She also likes fruit nuts and can swivel her knees at a high speed during an equinox of the moon. Whoop, bang. We all get paid for this, eh? These must be homeless, these people.
All right, I query the dates that you said for the end
How
of the...
dare you! What? John, go on.
The Milligan.
But,
1958.
Oh, what happened in 58?
The Goon Show lasted longer than that.
Did it?
Didn't it last longer than that?
I didn't measure it.
With repeats.
Yes, with the repeats, right.
Would you like to read this part again in which the...
In the Bed Sitting Room at the Duke of York's Theatre in 1963, Oblomov at the New Lyric Hammersmith in 1964, and son of Oblomov at the Comedy in the same year. I have written books called Pacoon, Silly Verse for Kids, A Dustbin in Milligan, Ridiculous Riddles, and a book for the deaf called Hello! Adolf Hitler, my part in his downfall.
I don't think that son of Oblomov was in the same year as Oblomov.
Well, I can't remember.
Aha.
It's all waste of time, all of this.
It was at the Comedy,
I
I'm sure.
could be on bottling fruit
So
now.
I'm going to query the show at the Duke of York.
Yes, I was at the Duke of
Bed
York.
Sitting Room.
Yes.
Was it at the Duke of York?
Yes.
Oh.
I'd like
We
to
have one more question each.
query the Oblomov at the New Lyric. I don't think it was.
Yes, we was at the
Was
New
it
Lyric.
Strand?
We started Oblomov at the New Lyric.
Anthea, your question?
But I've run out of questions.
Well,
John,
run out
please.
and get a pound of questions.
No, I
from the
can't
Scientific-
find anything.
William Rushton, your
Nor can
question.
I. No, I feel that is all true.
Right.
Yes.
That is the mistake.
I'll tell you the
Yes.
mistake. I am not Spike Milligan. I'm Mrs. Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, very good. Very good. I'd never have got that.
The mistake was that Spike Milligan did not write ridiculous riddles.
Too late! Let's clean that up. In fact, there are no mistakes in me. My life is pure. As the driven snow. Drive that snow over there.
Spike Milligan, thank you very much for being our guest.
Postmaster, spring the BBC!
We now continue with the program. Here is the weather forecast. I'm sorry. What is... A nail was formerly a measure of weight, used for wool, hemp, beef, and cheese. What weight did one nail equal? John Cleese.
7 pounds.
Have to be a very big nail, I would have thought, to weigh 7 pounds.
Wool, hemp, what other things?
Beef and cheese.
Wonderful pudding.
Not necessarily in that order.
7 pounds.
No.
5 points. Not 7 pounds.
It was 22 pounds.
22 pounds?
No.
5 points.
In fact, it used to be called a snail. But as it sounded rather unpleasant when you said a snail of meat. They changed the nail of meat. It was a pound.
Right or wrong?
A pound. No, otherwise they'd call it a pound, wouldn't it?
Well, a snail weighs about a pound. Good heavy snail.
It'd have to be. No, I think that's... Do you think
No. I think it's wrong.
I think it's wrong.
Wrong. 10
It's
points.
wrong.
It is wrong.
You're going to say?
Yes, it was actually called a knoll, not a nail. And they measured it in the same way with the weights.
Look, we're entirely disinterested in what it used to be called. I want to wait.
You want to wait?
Please.
It was then, a knoll weighed 14 pounds.
No.
No.
14 pounds.
No, 8 pounds.
10 points for wrong and 8 pounds for 20 points.
I don't know. They don't usually get given these weight ones. You know, we all muck about like this. I think no.
40 points to the men. Because it is 8 pounds. Were you given it?
Yes.
Yes.
But we knew.
We knew. We would have got it.
Sorry.
I think it's time for another tape. And I want you again to identify what is making this noise.
A very unhappy, constipated hippo.
Right or wrong?
Wrong. Wrong.
Wrong.
Wrong. The dead
Correct.
giveaway is
Correct.
12 lady elks steaming up the passageway here. It is, in fact, the mating call of the male elk.
Right or wrong?
What do you think of that?
Sounds rather convincing, but I don't know. I'd rather not look at them when they say things. It's much too difficult.
Look at those elks.
Now, look at those
Look at
elks.
them, trampling all over the
What of
audience.
an elk?
Down, madam.
I've been so wrong up to now.
No, I have too.
No, I don't think so. No.
No.
Correct. It's wrong.
Can we hear it again?
Yes, you can hear it again. I'll just give you the score, which is that the boys are 100 points ahead with 240 against the girls 140. And you shall hear the sound effect once more. I'm going to give, it is your turn in any case. I'm going to give 50 points for correct identification of this.
It's the third reading of the Industrial Relations Bill in the House of Lords.
50 points to the girls.
Very similar.
Sounds like my old man in the morning, but it can't be. I think it's a door, a creaking door that is a very old creaking door. I'm sure that's what it is.
No.
No.
50 points. No. It's not an old creaking door.
Do we go on?
Yes, you can have it for 100 points.
Well, I think Willie actually failed on the first time because he was simply too specific in saying elk. And I think it's an extremely large British sort of wild horse, or whatever it should be called. So I'll say it is the naughty call of a red deer, a male red deer, or a stag. I'll even allow myself stag.
A mating call.
A mating call.
A mating call.
I'm sure it is a mating call.
I like that bit at the end. Was that the same animal, that bit at the end? Are we allowed to know before we give an answer?
Yeah.
Well, look, the only answer you need consider is a red deer. We weren't concerned with what it was trying to say.
Yes, to the first part of the noise.
No, the answer is a red deer. The question was, what is making the noise? We're completely disinterested in constipation or mating. We want to know the name of the...
Can't be making that at the end.
They do make a foul noise. They do, just a sec. Yeah, they do.
All right, you say so. Right.
So,
yes.
Yes.
Right.
It's 200 points to the men. I would have thought it was rather an easy one to answer myself. Shall we hear it again?
Oh, yes.
I think it's Argo, isn't it?
No, it's over.
Oh, it's over. Because we said it was right.
You
it's
said
a
it was
donkey,
right.
Isn't it?
A donkey? No.
Oh.
Anyone in the audience? Best answer we've had yet. A camel.
Oh, yes.
It's a young Bactrian camel calling and wailing, it says, or Ian Messiter says.
Hundreds of them.
Under what name did Jacques Thibault write? Anthony Askey.
Enid Blyton.
Enid Blyton. No.
No, quite definitely not.
Can I just say that the boys now have 495 points against 190 by the girls. And we are on the last question.
Willie, come on, this is your
Under what name did Jacques Thibault write?
You read what makes you think it's my department?
Well, you've read a book.
It's a foreign book. I can't read foreign books.
Thibault.
Jean-Paul Sartre?
Jean-Paul Sartre?
No.
5 points.
It's Apollinaire.
That's very good.
This is for 10 points. Apollinaire?
I'd accept that, like a shot. I think that's very good.
Well, that's 20 points to the girls. I was trying very hard to let them catch up. In which
460
have
points.
defeated me. Jacques Thibault wrote under the name of Anatole France. Anatole France or Anatole France. And this is, having been the last question, this is the end of Right or Wrong and the end of the present series of Right or Wrong, but we will be coming back soon. So it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from William Rushton and John Cleese, who conclusively beat, as ever, Andre Melly and Anthea Askey.
Your chairman in Right or Wrong was Clement Freud. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Christopher Searle. This is the only game in which it's sometimes better to be wrong than right. It's called Right or Wrong. And right here is the man who's seldom wrong, Clement Freud.
Thank you very much, On my left are Sheila Hancock and Andre Melly, all set to do battle with the two men. On my right, John Cleese and Pete Murray. Let me try and tell you how the game works. I ask a question, and the team which wants to answer buzzes or rings. Men buzz, women ring. If the answer is correct and the other team agrees with them, then the first team score 5 points. If they're wrong, but with such conviction the other team thinks they're right, they score 10 points. In other words, you get twice as many points when one team successfully misleads the other, which is the point of the game. You can get double for being right as well, but only if the opposing team thinks that you're wrong. Anyway, you'll see how it works as we go along. Only to add a little extra spice and confusion, each team has been given 4 answers, but neither team knows which 4 answers the other team has. So in this atmosphere of mutual mistrust is the first question. What was the trade or profession of the father of Lady Emma Hamilton? Sheila Hancock.
I know this because I've just recently seen a play that she featured in. He was a farmer.
A farmer? Is that right or wrong?
I think it was said with such lack of conviction that... Wrong.
5 points. You're right. He was not a farmer. Sheila Hancock was wrong. You have 5 points.
John is very hysterical, or historical, I should really say.
Thank you.
And I'm sure
what was the trade or profession of the father of Lady
Well,
Emma
so far as I remember, this is the Hamilton who married Nelson. Didn't marry Nelson, in fact. But since it's BBC, we'll pretend she did. As far as I remember, he made all his money out of the tea business, so I think he was a tea merchant.
That was said with such conviction, it must be wrong.
Wrong.
That's 5 points to you.
Because he was an innkeeper.
Would you like to come to a quick, amicable agreement?
Go on, you go.
Innkeeper.
Innkeeper. Definitely an innkeeper.
Wrong, insufficiently upper class.
Upper class?
5 points. Never mind. 5 points. The substance was correct. What was the profession of Lady Emma Hamilton's father?
Well, John, I'm loath to say it because I know you know the answer. There's no point in my saying anything at all. I mean, I know that you've been bluffing them up now. Let's give them the real facts now.
All right, we'll read it off the paper on which we have the correct answers.
Right.
He was a stockbroker.
He's pretending.
Right.
He wasn't.
You're right, he was not. 5 points. There's now a bonus of 15 points.
Where's your turn?
Blacksmith. He was a blacksmith.
All right.
What, are you going to go along with that, are you?
I don't know. I don't like the way she's looking at me.
She's crafty.
Well, look at everybody.
Very crafty. They're sort of sniggling between each other there. What do you think, John?
Well, you've got it on the papers.
She's looking so cool at the moment, sipping a glass of water. I think she's right.
You're quite right.
I think so as
The girls get 15 points. They do not get 30 because they did not successfully fool the men. They now have 25 points. The men have 10 points. Lady Emma Hamilton's father was a blacksmith. And we come to the next question, which is, if 3 men can dig 3 holes in their communal garden in 2.5 weeks, how long will it take 1 man to dig half a hole?
Oh.
John Cleese.
1.25 weeks. No!
1.25 weeks.
1.25 weeks.
3 men dig 3 holes in their concerted gardens.
In how many weeks?
Communal garden.
Communal garden.
2.5 weeks. Or 17.5 days.
Oh, I
How
can't
many
be
men
bothered
to
with
do
it.
with what?
How long will it take 1?
I don't care. I just don't care.
How long will it take 1 man to dig half a hole?
1 man to dig half a hole. 1 man. Oh.
2.5 weeks, wasn't it, the whole thing?
I have my 7-year-old daughter in the audience. Perhaps she can know the answer.
6 days.
6 days.
Well, I thought they were going to say whether I was right or wrong, not counting.
You're wrong. You were wrong.
5 points.
3
6
men
days.
to dig 3 holes. 6 days.
2.5 weeks.
I was wrong.
Yes.
3 men.
3 men dig 3 holes. In
You're now
2.5
assessing the merit or otherwise of 6 days as an answer to the same question.
No, it's totally inapt.
That's correct. 5 points.
Yes, yeah.
Can we have the figures again?
Yes.
We can cut this out.
There'll be a bonus of 25 points now.
25 points.
If 3 men can dig 3 holes in their communal garden in 2.5 weeks, how long will it take 1 man to dig half a hole?
I think it's 2.5 days.
2.5 days. Is
Yes.
that right or wrong?
Wrong. No, it's wrong. It's
Correct.
2 3/4 days.
2 3/4 days for 10 points.
I think the universe has ceased to function as I know it, so I'm just going to sit here quiet.
I am going to give you the answer to this before anything nasty and ugly happens. Ian Messiter states it is not possible to dig half a hole.
Well, I'm glad I didn't get the answer to that because it's silly.
We move smoothly to who invented the telescope? Sheila Hancock.
No, I'm going to be wrong. Galileo.
Well, that's what I thought. It's too obvious, so it's wrong.
It's correct. 5 points.
Oh.
It is wrong.
It's, I think, it's probably Mr. Halley who discovered Halley's Comet, which was first seen extremely long time ago, 1066, so they didn't have telescopes then. So I think it was Mr. Halley, the original Mr. Halley.
What do you mean? He invented it in order to see his comet?
Well, either that, or
After or
as a
before?
result of inventing it.
Wrong.
He saw-
Wrong.
5 points. Bonus of 10. Who invented the telescope?
In its primitive form, Da Vinci.
Da Vinci.
Wrong.
10 points. Wrong.
Very glib, I thought that, didn't you, John?
Yes.
Yeah.
Much too glib. Norman Goose Posture? No.
That was a microscope.
Fritz Hans. Hans? Hans.
Hands what?
Hans Lip.
Hands?
Hans Lip. Lipper. Hans Lipper.
Shay?
Shay. Hans Lipper Shay.
I'm from Spicy.
I think it's right, because of all that production,
Yeah.
it sort of must be.
Right.
He is right.
I'd like to know how you were supposed to look as if you guessed that.
You must.
It was Hans Lippershey. Galileo used it as the model for his version, and the boys have 80 points, the girls 75. I'm going to play you a tape, and I want you to identify the speaker.
Je suis venu ici en 1913, juste avant la Première Guerre. Et alors, j'ai été l'hôte de la mission américaine, parce que les Américains ont été...
It's not Edward Heath.
Who would like to start?
Marche commune.
I think it's some...
John, please.
You haven't rung your what's it?
Beg your pardon. I think it's some elderly French gentleman, extremely elderly, who remembers some strange event early on, which was something to do with
Like
the
Josh.
balloons coming out of the Paris Commune in 1871.
Is he on
The balloons with which they communicated with
Would you
the
like to name
other
the commune
sympathetic
or
group.
just any commune?
No, I think the Paris Commune,
The Paris
the
Commune.
green one.
The man who remembered the balloons emerging from the Paris commune.
What was his name?
No, that's enough.
That's
if you-
enough.
If you believe it was he, I'll give it
No,
to you.
it's not quite right.
Fine,
Wrong.
5 points.
Because I think it was the Frenchman whose name escapes me, who flew over the channel, possibly in a balloon if that's necessary.
Yes, I accept that.
Yes, I do too.
You're wrong.
Oh.
So the girls get 10 points for successfully fooling you.
Oh.
It was Dr. Albert Schweitzer.
Oh,
It was.
We now come to the celebrity spot, and today's celebrity is Henry Cooper. Let me explain what happens. Henry Cooper will read a potted autobiography, which will contain one deliberate mistake upon which the teams will play right or wrong. You ready to start?
Ready, sir. I was born the 3rd of May, 1934, in a hospital in Westminster, and the family moved to Bellingham in South London when I was about 4 years old. I went to Athelney Street School and left when I was 15. The first boxing I ever did was at the Bellingham Amateur Boxing Club. In 1952, I won the ABA Championships. In the same year, going to the Olympic Games in Helsinki, where I lost to a Russian in the second series. And it was in 1952 I went into the Army, started my 2 years national service in the Royal Army Ordnance Corps. During that time, I won a second ABA title. When I left the Army in 1954, I turned professional, and Jim Wicks managed my brother and myself for nearly 17 years. In that time, I won the British, the Commonwealth and the European titles. I won 2 Lonsdale belts outright, and I am the only British boxer ever to do this. I also became the longest reigning British champion by beating Bombardier Billy Wells' record of nearly 10 years. I fought the world champion Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, or whatever you like to call him, in 1963 and 66, losing on a cut-eye decision.
There we are. Who would like to start the cross-examination? Andre Mellion.
I think that you say you won the ABA Championship in 52, and the same year, the Olympics. I think the Olympics was the year after.
Is that right or wrong?
That's wrong. Wrong.
Quite right, 5 points. Olympic Games take 4 years to... Anyway, wrong. Do you agree with me?
That was quite right.
I think that Henry, in fact, said he won 2 Lonsdale belts outright. He won 3 Lonsdale belts outright.
How do you feel about that?
I should think it's more than likely that he did. Lots more, I would think, Andre, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yes. Right. He did win more than 2.
Henry, you won 3 Lonsdale belts.
3 Lonsdale belts, yes.
And towards the 4th?
I had 1 notch on the 4th belt, yes. Yeah.
So it was very, very good guessing, or...
But we don't get any points. They get the points, the girls, don't they?
Yeah,
You get points for a correct identification, but you don't get double the points because you didn't fool them.
Oh.
I was going to say he didn't lose to a Russian at the Olympic Games because I didn't think that was possible, but it was before my time.
Can I ask how you win a Lonsdale belt?
Well, you have to win the British title once and then defend it successfully twice. So it means winning 3. I had 9 fights altogether. 9 total.
Can you wear them?
Well, they're a little bit cumbersome. They're no good for keeping your trousers up. But you can wear them.
You must have trophies galore at home, haven't you? What on earth do you do with them all?
Well, quite a few, yes. Well,
you keep them on
they're
show?
here, there, and everywhere, bits and pieces, and all over the house. You know, dust traps, as the wife says.
Oh, it's just dust.
Henry, can I ask you a question? What happened to the Russian who beat you in Helsinki?
I think he got beat in the semi-final, I think, or something. I can't think now. The trip was so long ago, I even forget.
Now in the sword mines. Of all the treasured possessions you've got from boxing, which is the most treasured one you have?
Well, I think basically, the actual trophies I've got.
Yes.
Memories. Or
take memories and.
Well, I think the Lonsdale belts are the great thing, because every British fighter, when you start off, it's your ambition to win one, you know.
Yeah.
To win three was, you know, something fantastic. But I think the memory that will always stay with me is the world title fight with Clay at Highbury, you know, in '66. That night there was such a fantastic atmosphere in the audience, you know, it was so thick you could cut it with a knife, you know. I don't think that'll ever be repeated again. You know?
Are you actually aware of the atmosphere when you're fighting? I mean, obviously you are when you come into the ring. But
Well, not so much when you're fighting, because once that bell goes, everything outside the ring is black, as you know, when the lights come on and they turn the house lights down or the other lights. So naturally, you know, you're concentrating so much. But previous to that, as I say, when they, you know, the walking in and the playing of the national anthem.
Yeah, it's great.
I had a lump in my throat like a golf ball, and you know, there's a very mood in the thing.
Yeah, but I expect when you get in there, you're not particularly aware of anything.
No, not really. Only of the other guy.
Henry Cooper, thank you very much for being our celebrity on Right or Wrong.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Clement.
And from Lonsdale Belts, lumps in throats and things black in the ring, which I suppose is another way of saying Cassius Clay, we go back to Right or Wrong. Who wrote this? Your glazing is new and your plumbing is strange, but otherwise I perceive no change. And in less than a month, if you do as I bid, I'd learn you to build me a pyramid. Andre Melly.
Belloc.
John and Pete.
I thought Belloc was quite good, and I thought that was so awful, so indescribably appalling, that I wouldn't attribute it to Belloc.
So?
They are wrong.
5 points.
On the other hand, who did write it? A man so obscure, clearly, that one would have to pull his name out of the hat. How about, what was his name? Hans Lippershade. Translated from the Swedish.
Wrong.
5 points.
You're no fun anymore.
I know who it was. It was actually, the reason it's so bad, it was written by a man who didn't excel at verse. It was written by Lawrence of Arabia in one of those endless letters he wrote to Mrs. Shaw.
It's a lovely theory, but I think he would have written a good deal better than that.
No, not to her.
10 points.
I think it was written by Billy Bremner.
Yes, I think.
Wrong.
10 points. It's
Wrong.
bonus of 15 now.
The time has come to stop messing about. It was Rudyard Kipling.
Wrong.
30 points to the girls because they were right.
Oh, fuck. Why did you ask me?
It was Rudyard Kipling, and I do agree with John Cleese. It was an
it's the
awful
giggle.
poem.
That's the give it away.
And the girls now have 135, having got 30 for that, against the boys 100.
Oh, well.
If you found a lump of hydrous phosphate of aluminium and copper, what single word could you use to name it?
Iceland Spa.
John Cleese.
Wrong.
You're right.
Could you tell us
5
again?
points. Hydrous phosphate of aluminium and copper.
A new penny piece.
A new penny piece. How do you feel about that?
New penny piece. An
Yeah.
English penny piece?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
One of the metal ones.
She does not. No,
That's not
wrong.
Not that.
5 points. It is wrong.
Wrong.
Bonus of 10 points.
It's a precious stone. It is a gourmandise.
Get off. No, wrong.
Could you say get off? I mean, it's very expressive, but if you would just...
Wrong, I just said
Sorry.
wrong. Very wrong.
10 points. It is wrong.
Zinc. Lonsdale Belt.
A zinc Lonsdale belt.
Ointment. Zinc ointment.
10 points. Right or wrong?
Wrong.
10 points. Bonus of 20 points.
How many behind are we at the moment, Clemens?
You are 35 points behind.
35 points behind. We've got to be very careful here.
20 points.
I think it is a precious stone.
You said that.
And yes, but I didn't get the right. What were the ingredients again?
It is hydrous phosphate,
Hydrous
aluminium and
phosphate.
copper.
Well, I did chemistry, so I know it. Hydrous phosphate is blue. And Aluminium is white, so it's a bluish, reddish. What's a bluish reddish?
Bluish reddish. Bluish reddish. Sounds like a vegetable. Bluish reddish.
Turquoise.
How's that?
Wrong.
It's 40 points to the men because it was right. Which gives the men a 5-point lead.
That's what we were working on.
Did they have it written down?
Yes.
Did you have it written down?
We did.
We did, yes.
You did very well. How many pincers does the North Atlantic lobster have?
Wait a moment, I saw one this morning.
John Cleese.
It had, well, let me think, it had 1, 2, 3 on one side, it had 1, 2 on the other side, and 1 at the back. So it had 6.
Is that right or wrong?
Wrong.
No,
Well,
it's
actually,
right.
it's.
We would have.
I'm afraid the first I have to accept.
It's right.
It is right. Actually, the first 2 are relatively large, and the next 4 on the first 2 pairs of legs. Ian Messiter says.
That's right.
But 6 is the right answer. So it's 10 points to the men
And we're
Never
for
mind.
successfully fooling you.
Never mind. I was
We're now going to
desperate.
play another tape, and I want you to listen. I'll then ask you a question. Right, this piece of music represents one of the planets. I want you to tell me which one. Andre Melli.
Jupiter.
Do you think she's come up with that rather pat to get her own back on the last one? What do you think?
Well, let's agree, because we don't lose so many points if she's right. Yes.
No. 10 points to the girls. It was Mercury, and it's from the planet Sweet by Holst.
Gustav Holst.
Which cyanide is usually used to extract gold and silver from ores?
Pardon?
Which cyanide is usually used to extract gold and silver from ores? Andre Melli.
The usual one.
I don't accept that as an answer. Running over.
Potassium cyanide.
Potassium cyanide.
Potassium cyanide.
The men are 5 ahead.
Has a certain ring to it, doesn't it, John?
Well, it's very dangerous extracting anything with cyanide. I think that it is incorrect.
You're correct. It is incorrect. Which cyanide? Usually used to extract gold and silver from ores.
Yeah.
Well, now, let's think. Gold and silver, heavy metals. Lower end of the periodic table. Therefore, one would need
Bluish red.
Bluish red, yes. Building up effects. Silence was. I think in order to extract heavy metal, you would have to use
Hurry up.
sodium. Sodium cyanide.
Sodium cyanide. Right or wrong?
Have you ever heard of it?
I've never heard of any of it. Sodium, not even gold.
When he usually does all that, it's usually right. Isn't it? He's right.
5 points, he is right.
I didn't know he was right.
Did you know this?
No, I hadn't the slightest idea I was right.
But it puts the men 15 points ahead. What is the Drummond light?
The Drummond light?
Yes.
Sir Walter Drummond.
Well, what's his like?
Sir Walter Drummond, the explorer, Antarctic. It is a lighthouse of Tierra del Fuego in Argentina.
Well, either he's an explorer or a
Wrong.
lighthouse.
5 points is wrong. What is the Drummond light?
The Drummond light was a kind of lamp invented for coal miners.
No, that was the Davy lamp.
There were others. What others?
Different minds have different lights.
The Drummond light...
Drummond.
Is that
And we
right?
haven't got to say whether it's right or wrong.
It's false. Incorrect.
Your right was wrong.
We're wrong, it was right.
No,
In
your
fact,
right
it was wrong.
Wrong.
It was wrong.
What is the Drummond light?
Robert Newton played the part. And it was actually... you were right in the first part a little while ago when you were talking about the... what do they call those things in the sea? The light... What do they call it? The lighthouse. The
Lighthouse.
Yes.
Lighthouse.
Yes. And it was just off Beachy Head. And he was a very interesting man, this man, because he discovered some very interesting rock formations just off Eastbourne.
With his light, presumably,
Yes, George
shining his
Drummond
light.
was-
Wrong.
Oh,
It's a
no.
diamond.
Pardon?
It's a diamond. The
We've got to
Drummond
go. We've got to recap. Off Beachy Head, wrong. 10 points. What is the Drummond light?
A diamond.
A diamond.
I think that's very good, and I believe that.
So do I.
It's
Right.
20 points to the girls. In 1825, Thomas Drummond invented limelight, which is known as Drummond light.
Yes.
And when you said, you mentioned an actor, didn't you?
Robert Newton.
Robert Newton. Was he not in a film called Limelight?
No, that was Charlie Chaplin.
Charlie Chaplin.
I saw it with
Robert Newton.
Yes.
Who's playing
So
you
in
and I?
future, when the lighting is dim, we say, let's have a drop more of the Drummonds.
Of the old Drummond.
Yes.
What was or is the stage name of Erich Weiss? Sheila Hancock.
Eric Sykes.
Right or wrong? There's 10 points between you.
Yes.
The men
Eric
have
Sykes.
Yes.
Yes.
You must remember him.
Erich Weiss.
Eric
Yes.
Weiss.
Yes. Of course, you must remember that
Eric Weiss. Wrong.
Wrong.
Correct.
Nonsense.
There's now 5 points between you.
Eric
The
Weiss.
girls lead.
Eric Weiss.
I think you ought to tell you this is the last question.
Very well known.
He was Weiss.
Yes, chairman.
Eric Weiss. Weiss. Eric.
Erich.
Eric. He was... His real name was George Naughty. No, he was, in
That's
fact...
10 points to the girls because you weren't listening. I said, what was or is the stage name of Erich Weiss, not his real name.
Yes, yes.
So it's 10 points to the girls, and it's their...
Oh, well, then we'll tell you. It was Coco the Clown.
That's a very good one.
Very well, I like
yes, Yes, we like that, I think. We like that. I think we're
10
inclined
point
to agree
bonus.
with that.
No,
Do you
I
think...
don't-
Oh,
no,
we're
no,
not.
I don't
No, we don't
agree.
think we agree with that.
I think it's wrong.
That's correct. It
Yes.
is wrong.
Yeah.
10 points to the men. The girls now lead by 5 points.
It is, in fact, the name of a very well-known film star, not known as Eric Weiss, of course, or Weiss,
So 15-point bonus.
Jack Lemmon.
She said things. No.
15 points. It was not Jack Lemmon.
Well, if you saw that, there was a thing on television just recently about Houdini, and in that they told you that his name was, in fact, Erich Weiss.
Houdini.
Yes.
Yes.
I like that.
It was his
I like
Yes.
that.
And I don't
like
think they've had all their answers yet.
No.
I mean, I like that.
I like it. And I think that
Is
the
it
way...
right
It's,
or
it's,
wrong?
it's right.
I
Right?
beg your pardon.
It is right. It was Houdini.
Yes.
And Houdini gets 15 points for the girls, who finish up winning by 35 points.
Oh, great.
235 to the girls, 200 to the boys. The end of Right or Wrong. Goodbye from Andre Melly and Sheila Hancock, who have beaten John Cleese and Pete Murray. And until next week, goodbye from me.
Your chairman in Right or Wrong was Clement Freud. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Christopher Searle.
Let the shipwrecks of others be your sea marks.
For things unknown there is no desire.
Never mind, dear. Laugh it off, laugh it off. It's all part of life's rich pageant.
Quote, unquote, the quotations quiz devised and introduced by Nigel Rees.
Hello again. It was William James, the American psychologist, who said,
"A great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices."
Spoken there for us by Peter Jefferson, and appropriate because William James was the brother of the more famous Henry, the American-born novelist who resided in the town where, quote-unquote, has come visiting today. We are in Rye, in East Sussex, during the Rye Festival. And visiting with us are Kate Adie, the BBC's chief news correspondent and presenter of Radio 4's From Our Own correspondent, Christopher Lee, the political and military historian, whose latest book is The History of 1603, Mary Ann Sieghart, the rollerblading assistant editor of The Times, and that comedy performer and actor recently released from medium-term residency in Coronation Street, Roy Hudd. And we begin, as ever, by finishing off. Can you complete these sayings or quotations, either as was originally done or in any way to suit yourselves? Kate Adie.
Now is the time for all good men.
Oh, clearly something which should be said on a soapbox, to come to the aid of the party.
So you think it's a slogan?
Well, it sounds like one, but I have a sneaky feeling that it's possibly written. It's been parodied so many times. I have the feeling it was rather carefully crafted and appeared in print. Possibly Victorian?
Well, 19th century, it's not actually a slogan, but a typewriter exercise, possibly originated by an American, Charles E. Weller, to test the efficiency of the first practical typewriter. And unfortunately, he didn't do a very good job, because the phrase only contains 18 letters of the alphabet. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, on the other hand, has all 26. Christopher Lee, I'm quoting here from Robert Owen, the philanthropist and social experimenter at New Lanark and so on. When he was breaking off with one of his business partners, he said to him,
"All the world is queer, save thee and me, and
my Uncle Arthur, who we all suspected."
No? Well, not quite, no. In fact, what he actually said was, "All the world is queer save thee and me, and even thou art a little queer." But either way, I don't think he would have been allowed to say it today. No. Mary Ann Sieghart, can you finish off this children's rhyme for us? A quote-unquote listener, David Williams, recalls that his mother, the Welsh poet Myfanwy Haycock, used to recite this to him when he was small.
"Fire, fire, Mrs. Briar."
Can't say I've ever recited that to my children. I don't know, look out now, your pants are on fire or something.
Well, there are various versions as to how it goes on, but it is a children's rhyme. Fire, fire, Mrs. Briar. Where, Mrs. Blair. Downtown, Mrs. Brown. Any damage, Mrs. Gamage. None at all, Mrs. Ball. And there is another version which Peter has.
"Fire, fire," cried the town crier. Where, said Goody Blair. "Down the town," said Goody Brown. "I'll go see it," said Goody Fleet. "So will I," said Goody Fry.
I rather like the two neighbours known as Goody Blair and Goody Brown. Roy Hudd, can you finish off this much-quoted remark, often misattributed to Sir Arnold Bax, the composer?
"You should make a point of trying every experience once, excepting..."
Mending a watch standing up in a hammock. I have no idea. It'd be something very rude, I should think.
It's almost rude. You should make a point of trying every experience once, excepting incest and folk dancing. It's often wrongly attributed to Sir Thomas Beecham and also to Sir Arnold Bax himself. But in fact, Arnold Bax, in his book Farewell My Youth, said it was a sympathetic Scotsman who had said this. Round two, who was that lady? Roy?
That was no lady. That was my brother. He just walks that way.
Now, who is that lady? By which I mean which lady or woman is referred to in the following quotations. Kate.
"O thou art fairer than the evening's air, clad in the beauty of 1,000 stars."
Someone sighing lustfully, or possibly just sort of trying to get round a bird somehow.
She started a war.
Well, I fear it was therefore not possibly Mrs. Thatcher launching many ships. I can't remember anyone, even the Daily Mail, writing that enthusiastically about her. So perhaps it might be somebody starting a war in ancient times. Helen of Troy, the place that launched 1,000 ships?
Yes, as described by Dr. Faustus in Christopher Marlowe's band. In fact, it's just after the bit about her having the face that launched 1,000 ships. "O thou art fairer than the evening's air, clad in the beauty of 1,000 stars." A nice compliment there. Christopher, who was this lady? The one who reputedly said,
"God may pardon you, but I never can."
Oh, that was Margaret Thatcher, wasn't it? About Edward Heath. Actually, Sir Walter Raleigh's wife, during his trial, when William Wade had failed to bring the evidence that he promised to bring, said something very similar, that God may be forgiving you, but I shall never do so. But then his former monarch said something like that. Elizabeth?
Elizabeth I. In 1603, she said it to
Just before she died.
Just before she died, and also just before the person she said it to died, the Countess of Nottingham. And do you know what the Countess of Nottingham had not done?
It was to do with Essex.
Yes.
And was it a glove or something that she hadn't returned?
A ring. She failed to execute the commission of returning a ring from the Earl of Essex to the Queen, and when Queen Elizabeth I found out, she upbraided her on what turned out to be her deathbed. Mary Ann, who was the woman described here by that well-known denizen of Rye, Henry James?
She is magnificently ugly, deliciously hideous. But in this vast ugliness resides a most powerful beauty, which, in a very few minutes, steals forth and charms the mind, so that you end, as I ended, in falling in love with her. Yes, behold me literally in love with this great horse-faced blue-stocking.
Well, if it's 19th century and she's horse-faced and she's that wonderful, I think it must be my namesake, Mary Ann Evans, otherwise known as George Eliot.
It was indeed. Henry James wrote that description in a letter in May 1869, and it caught her rather well, I thought.
Yes, wonderful.
Another time we'll bring you what George Eliot said about Henry James. And Roy, who was this lady?
I would like to thank all of you for watching me and my little show here tonight. If you have enjoyed it, then it has all been worthwhile. Good night, and I love you all.
It wasn't Jane of the Daily Mirror, was it?
In what way would she have said it?
Well, Jane of the Daily Mirror, she was obviously a girl who posed for the strip cartoon of the Daily Mirror. Leighton Porter, her name was, and she actually became a stripper. And she did her own show in the variety theatres, and she always finished up with a little poem to the audience. Was that her?
No, it wasn't. You remember this, Kate?
It isn't Good Night and I Love You All. It isn't Dame Edna, is it?
No.
Oh, I know who it is. I know who it is now. It's the girl who used to be at the end of the Morecambe and Wise show.
Yep.
Janet Webb.
Janet Webb, that's
Yeah.
right. What did she used to do? She used to push them aside and take the thanks or the applause from Eric and Ernie. Well, now, thank you if you have written or emailed, quote-unquote, about quotations in earlier programmes. In the last series, I suggested, unwisely as it turned out, that the title phrase of Paul Simon's song,
Bridge Over Troubled Water,
although sounding biblical, was in fact original to him, while conceding that, oddly, the word bridge appears nowhere in the King James Bible. Val Wilmer delicately put it to me, you could not have chosen a worse candidate to cite for originality than Bridge Over Troubled Water. Paul Simon has apparently conceded that the phrase may have been influenced by this passage from the 1959 gospel song, "O Mary, Don't You Weep."
Wish I had somebody to help me call me. Yeah, Mary. Oh, Mary, don't you? Yeah, Mary. I'll be your bridge over deep water if you trust in my name.
And that was the Reverend Claude Jeter, lead singer of the Swan Silvertones gospel group, singing I'll be your bridge over deep water if you trust in my name. Not quite Paul Simon's phrase, but near enough, and that's where he may have got it from. Now, as we have one of them in our midst today, what quotations have you been ferreting out for us on the subject of history and historians? Kate Adie.
Well, when it comes to history and historians, I look at the way that history gets written and gets finally into the public domain, having been often in the possession of great men who don't really want to let anybody else know about it. And there's a classic moment in 1945 when I was researching a book about women and war, when looking at the experience of the women from Special Operations Executive, SOE, and they'd done fantastic things, and many had been parachuted into France, captured, tortured, and some executed. There is somewhere a cabinet reference, I've found people mentioning it, about a meeting of cabinet ministers who were told what these women had done. And they said, I don't think we can put this in the public domain. And they said, history will judge us because we will never be forgiven for being men who sent women into such danger. And for some years, the history was covered up.
Christopher Lee, historians, history.
Somebody I admired very much was Gerard Evans, the Cambridge historian. And he said it as if it were original, but he said that history certainly does not repeat itself, but historians do. And I suppose Carlyle, who really sums the whole thing up, history of the world is but a biography of great men. And if you really want to understand history, then read the biographies of those people that made it.
Marianne Seacott.
I've dug out a nice one from an American historian called Earl R. Beck. And he says, no one can really know the life of his own day, let alone that of times long past. Always the historian sees as in a mirror darkly the reds and golds rendered drab by the shadows of time. And I love that because it reminds me of those medieval cathedrals, which in their time were incredibly brightly painted and have now faded to nothing but the odd scrap of a wall painting. So it's a very visual image, that one. Plus you have the biblical reference of seeing in a mirror darkly. On a lighter note, Ian MacLeod said history is too serious to be left to historians, which I thought was a bit of a cheat coming from a politician. But my favourite one actually comes from Tolstoy, who said, historians are like deaf people who go on answering questions that no one has asked them.
Roy Hudd.
One of my great heroes is the American comedian Milton Berle, who was terrific. And he said about history, history is an account of something that never happened, written by someone who wasn't there. And on American comics again, the great famous 100-year-old George Burns used to quote saying to a grandchild of his, when I was your age, history was my best subject. And the boy answered, when you were my age, what had happened? Now, I tell you what, should we try for a bit of audience participation now? This is a verse of one of my very favourite music hall songs. Now, it's very much about history, and if you can join in the chorus that follows the verse, you'll know exactly what I mean. And the verse goes, you don't know who you're looking at? Well, take a look at me. I'm a bit of a knob, I am. Belong to royalty. I'll tell you how it came about. I married Widow Birch, and I was King of England when I toddled out of church. Outside the people started shouting, hip hooray. I said, get down upon your knees. It's coronation day. I'm Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am, I am. I got married to the widow next door. She's been married 7 times before, and everyone was an Henry. She wouldn't have a Willie or a Sam. I'm a great old man called Henry. Henry VIII, I am.
Okay. Well, I didn't expect that, Roy. Well, now back to the quiz and to the origins of some phrases that you might be familiar with. Kate Adie, where would you usually encounter this expression?
Alarums and excursions.
Oh, in the margins, there's a way of reading Shakespeare that the bits that they give you as instructions when you're desperately, particularly in a school play, trying to work out who goes on and who comes off and what you're meant to do, and you can't work out what the school play production is going to do about the stage direction which says exit pursued by a bear. There's an even better one, I think, in one of the later plays which says exit a bastard. So Alarms and Excursions, one of the history plays.
Yes.
Lots of noise, lots of sounds of battle.
Yes, it's in the third part of Henry VI and in Richard III. Sometimes it's alarms and excursions, and sometimes it's alarums and excursions. An alarm being...
Oh, would we have lots of trumpets and sounds?
Yeah.
And excursions, well, I don't think it's a coach trip to the seaside. I think it's something to do with getting the troops out onto the field.
Yeah, it's like a sally against the enemy. Yes, and you might use this phrase now about any sort of confused situation, alarms and excursions. Christopher Lee, in the last series of quote-unquote, we mentioned that this phrase had been applied to the game of golf, but what, as many rush to point out to us, is it more usually applied to?
The great game.
It ought to be cricket. But no longer a test match is won on the playing fields of Eton, but wars are. And so it's 19th century, isn't it? It's northwest frontier, that sort of thing.
Yep, British Empire and Russian Empire squabbling over the northwest frontier and into the debatable lands of Central Asia. Yes, that's how it was used by Kipling and others. Mary Ann Seacart, the original source of this phrase, please.
Bloody but unbowed.
It sounds like Macbeth to me. But I may be wrong. I mean, he talks about being in blood steeped so far that turning were as, is it arduous as going o'er?
It's later than
that,
Macbeth, yes. It's from a Victorian poem, very famous one. It's the one that also includes the lines, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. It's by W.E. Henley, and it's called Invictus. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Roy Hard, where might you have first encountered this currently popular phrase?
It does exactly what it says on the tin.
It's an advert, but you hear it used all the time now, don't you? People say it was an advert for a wood preservative, wasn't it?
Ronseal, yes. And now people use it about anything if they're saying that something does exactly what it's expected to do, or does it very well. It does exactly what it says on the tin, or the box, or the can, or the packet. Now, round 4 is about what? Namely, what are these quotations about? Kate, in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, what is happening when Alice cries,
Curiouser and curiouser. She was so much surprised that for the moment she quite forgot how to speak good English.
Ooh, probably at the moment when she was being looked upon by that curious caterpillar with a hooker sitting on a toadstool. She was getting bigger or smaller.
That's right.
And I can't remember. She'd either done the drink me or eat me bit. You know, there's a bottle or the cake with the label attached.
It was the cake with the words "Eat Me" on it.
Eat me.
So she was opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. That's why she said curiouser and curiouser. Christopher, about what was the historian A.J.P. Taylor lecturing when he said,
It may give you a quiet life. It may even bring you a university chair. But all change in history, all advance, comes from...
Moderation.
No.
Moderator?
No.
Not even Scottish moderator?
No.
Religion?
No.
What else is there?
Well, he said this in a series of lectures which ended up in a book called The Troublemakers.
As far as Alan Taylor was concerned, if you were a troublemaker, academically you might even be a Roman Catholic. So perhaps if you stuck to the established church ways, whether you're conformist or non-conformist, you might end up with a university chair.
Well, what he was really saying was that conformity may give you a quiet life, it may even bring you a university chair, but it's non-conformity that he was really talking about. And he went on, if there had been no troublemakers, no dissenters, we should still be living in caves. Marianne, what is Iago talking about when he says to Othello in Shakespeare's play?
It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock that meats it feeds on.
Well, that's jealousy, isn't it? The green-eyed monster. Absolutely, the whole theme of Othello is jealousy.
Oh, beware jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster. And Roy, what is this expression about?
Never wrestle with a chimney sweep.
I seem to remember Julian Clary telling me this once, but I presume it means, actually, it means don't get involved with somebody who you might leave black marks on you or something, or don't get involved with someone who will be disgraceful or get you into trouble.
It's a great favourite of Tony Benn's, who got it from his father. It means don't soil yourself by responding to your opponent's dirty tricks. Tony Benn said, for the Labour Party to rub its hands with glee, this was about the perfumer affair in 1963, would be like wrestling with a chimney sweep. And in Boswell's Life of Dr. Johnson, it occurs as, you do not jostle a chimney sweep. And I suppose the idea is that if you do such a thing, the dirt rubs off on you. And so we turn finally to great eccentrics. What are your quotations on the subject of eccentricity? Perhaps about individual eccentrics. Kate Adie.
The wonderful Sam Goldwyn, from whom many bon mots, well, not quite bon, but certainly mots came. He was once commissioned to write a series of articles, and he delegated them to a ghostwriter. One week, the guy was sick and got yet someone else to write the article, and Goldwyn then read it and said, "This is not up to my usual standard."
One of the Sam Goldwyn was, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you.
And finally, one from Edison, a great, and as all inventors, distinctly eccentric man who is at work in his laboratory trying to invent a new storage battery. And one of his assistants remarked on his string of failures, 50,000 failures, not much of a result. Results, said Edison. Why, I've gotten a lot of results. I know 50,000 things that won't work.
Eccentricity, Christopher Lee.
Was it Goldwyn at 92 who said, if I knew I was going to live so long, I'd have taken better care of myself? John Stuart Mill, in his introduction to On Liberty, he said that so few now dare to be eccentrics marks the chief danger of our time. And I think we ought to put that up somewhere.
Right. Now, Marianne Seacart, have you had any eccentrics in your family, even?
Well, a lot, yes. My great-grandfather, who I never met, sadly, has the favourite stories in my family. He was called Stephen Howard, and he was a Liberal MP and a farmer in Cambridgeshire. He was a major in the Home Guard, whatever they called it then, in the First World War. And after dinner, he used to insist on drilling his wife, his daughter, and all the dining room chairs. Which, of course, they hated, the chairs as well. He had the first motor car in Cambridgeshire, which he used to drive around, I suspect, rather dangerously. But when he stabled it, he refused to keep it in a room called the garage, because he thought that was a filthy foreign word, and he called it the motor house. Despite being a Liberal MP, I don't think he was an internationalist somehow. He also insisted that the only food that a human being needed to live on was a banana. And so he had branches of bananas hanging from strings in his motor house, and could never understand, he said, why anybody would want to eat rice. And when it was pointed out to him that this was actually the staple diet of half the world, he said, well, more fools they. He was also fascinated by electricity, which had just been invented, and wired the whole house himself successfully, amazingly, from a book. And he also taught himself dentistry from a book, and he used to pull the teeth of all his farm workers.
Well, I think you have found a real eccentric there. When the word eccentric comes up, Roy Hudd, who do you think of?
Well, the great eccentric actor who I loved was a man called Wilfrid Hyde White. Remember Wilfrid Hyde White? And on being asked what he'd learnt at drama school, he said two things. One, that I couldn't act. And 2, it didn't matter. What you were saying, Mary-Anne, about him pulling all his workers' teeth out, there's a great, very eccentric northern musical comedian called Frank Randall, who worked nearly all the time without his teeth in, you know. And he really was an extremely eccentric bloke. He persuaded one of his fellow workers who worked in sketches with him, he said, "You'll never be funny until you have all your teeth out." And this bloke went round the dentist and had all his teeth out, and he fired him. George Melly told me this story, that Frank Randall was playing variety theatre up north, and he put an advert in the local paper, and it said, "Wanted chauffeur stroke bricklayer." So, apply Mr. F. Randall, care of the stage door at the Palace Theatre, wherever it was. And the stage doorkeeper said to him, "What is this, Mr. Randall, this advert? Why chauffeur stroke bricklayer?" He said, "Obviously I need a chauffeur to drive me around," he said, "and they always will only work for 6 days. They get 1 day off." He said, "So on that day I have to drive myself. And I get so Brahms and Liszt," he said, "I always knock our front wall down."
All right. Well, thank you very much for those quotations about eccentrics and eccentricity. Closing word sent in by our quote-unquote listener, Tom G. Eaton. As he says, it's just a joke, really, but I think it's good enough to be preserved for posterity by your programme. It's what the noted philosopher, not to say eccentric, Mr. Ken Dodd, said on the subject of reincarnation.
I don't see the point of coming back as a tin of milk.
Well, there you are, you see. Whatever it says on the tin from quote-unquote at the Rye Festival, goodbye.
Taking part in quote-unquote were Kate Adie, Roy Howard, Christopher Lee and Marianne Seacart. The quotations were read by me, Peter Jefferson. Nigel Rees devised and introduced the programme, and the producer was Carol Smith.
Triona Young.
Schoolgirl Curran Sanderson, aged 15, of Rotherham, was back with her family today after sparking a police alert by leaving home rather than watch Des O'Connor on TV.
Well, thank you, Mrs. E. Glasgow of York, for sending us that. And now let's meet the teams. Will you welcome first, on my right, Richard Ingrams and Peter Cook. Facing them on my left, Alan Corran and Tony Banks. Before we start round one, here's a tale from the Wiltshire Gazette and Herald.
A drunken reveller who hitched a 20-mile ride on the buffers of a freight train is to be prosecuted for travelling without a ticket. The man climbed on at Reading and was spotted at Didcot Station when he shouted to staff on the platform, "Does this stop at Swindon?"
Well, thank you, Bridget Harpen of Colston, for sending that one in. Richard, question. Which father is now also a daddy?
He's not actually a father, is he, at all?
No,
he's a bishop.
That's right.
But he is a father in the sense
he
of
is a father, yes.
having fathered a beautiful child, Richard.
Well, I didn't think he was very beautiful. I think he's rather nasty.
What, the child?
The child, yes. And that awful woman.
Oh, I didn't know there was a woman involved as well.
I think there has to be, Peter. I'm not
No, I've been out of the country. I wouldn't know about that.
I'm not altogether sure of that. Anyway, it's poor old Bishop Casey, who fell in with this ghastly old bat, Mrs. whatever her name is. There you are.
Well, you've certainly got us off to a flying
one thing
start.
led to another, Barry. I leave it at that.
But I feel it was very gracious of him to pay up through church funds and having been found out to admit it. That was terribly brave.
Yes, indeed. This is Eamon Casey, the Catholic Bishop of Galway, who, it seems, has been delivering his Sermon on the Mount. And the Pope gave Eamon Paternity Casey a stiff dressing down, as if he wasn't in enough trouble already, and told him to pull his socks up. And any other items of clothing. But in the eyes of the Catholic Church, it could have been a lot worse. At least the bishop can prove he hadn't used a condom. Well, that completes the good taste round. Peter, your question now. Who gave the royal we?
Well, my goodness me. The royal we, I think, was Her Majesty.
It was.
In a controversial speech in which she admitted that she was Queen of England. And that Europe was over there, and good luck to them.
I think you've got the nub of it there, Pete.
Oh, so I'll certainly have. I'll try and get out of this rotten Irish accent. It's something normal.
Yes, absolutely right. It's Elizabeth II's speech to the European Parliament in Strasbourg, the one she had to delay until after the abdication of Queen Margaret. Tony, your question now. What knight heralded a Norman conquest?
I think that must be something to do with the new chairperson of the Conservative Party, Sir Norman Fowler,
right.
Who, when I remember, in 1989, I think it was, quit as a cabinet minister, saying that he wanted to spend more time with his family. Obviously, his family didn't want to spend more time with him, and he's now been made chairman of the Conservative Party.
Absolutely right. It's the new chairman of the Conservative Party, Sir Norman Fowler, appointed as John Major's election campaign minder on the grounds that he's the only man in Britain who makes the Prime Minister look colourful. The chairman must now work to ensure the factors which swept the Conservatives to victory in '92 are in place for the next election. The recession is still with us, unemployment is worsening, all he needs to do is to raise interest rates, and the fifth term's in the bag. Now, Alan, strangely, here's a piece of music for you.
Koi minero, giltil kero, koi minero, koi mi. Plim slim stam a little darabona ring, pingaling them bullerim koi.
That Irish bishop, isn't it?
No. It's the one about Elizabeth Taylor making a comeback as a drunk in this new film.
It was a Channel Island folk song, actually. It was sung by Adolphus Leruez. And the question is, who are channeling their efforts against English rule?
Oh, well, it's the unreconstituted Nazis of the Channel Islands. Having got a taste for it during the war, they've now got some petit poujadi, some little ratbag, who's threatened the authority of the Queen. I saw him on television, lots of big blonde women, you'd think he was a bishop, big blonde women standing behind him and urging him on with strange cries. It was very like the Third Reich. I think he'll take the Sudetenland tomorrow, but at the moment, he's got one of these bizarre things like the third stick of Sark, you know, the odd names these freaks have, and he's taking over the island, hip and thigh. Very bad news.
He's actually a judge.
He's a judge,
yes.
Well, that's even worse.
His crime was that he was taking his cases too slowly, I think. Any judge like that.
It's very, very hard to believe, isn't it?
Well, it is.
Taking it too slowly.
I believe it is.
But he is actually
Because St. Helier was the patron saint of tardiness, if I remember.
Absolutely right, Alan. It's the revolting satellite state of Jersey where Whitehall's sacking of local judge Vernon Tomes saw the downtrodden masses of oppressed millionaires and tax exiles taking to the streets in protest. One Jersey freedom fighter compared English rule to the German occupation and has started offering bed and breakfast for pilots in his loft. Another spent all morning turning around road signs and all afternoon trying to find his way home. And the scores at the end of the first round are, as always on this programme, 4-all. Before we start round two, here's an item from the Kenilworth Weekly News, sent to us by Brian Woods Scowen of Kenilworth.
Elizabeth the chef's bakery was broken into on Sunday night. Nothing was stolen, but a leg was bitten off a gingerbread man.
Richard, whose legal judgment was judged legally the worst?
This is not Judge Tomes, but it was another judge who won the top marks in the Worst Judge of the Year competition. And his name is Mr. Justice Harman.
Quite correct.
And he's famous for two things. One is for saying, in a case, who is Jimi Hendrix? That was his first claim to fame.
Who is it?
Well, I still don't know myself. And the other was more recently, when during the Maxwell affair, he came out and kicked a taxi driver in the shins. And he said, oh, well, it's all right, because I thought he was a journalist.
Absolutely. This is all about Mr. Justice Harman, who was voted least respected High Court judge of 1992, and he was up against some pretty stiff competition this year. In an event a bit like Miss World, except the judges wear sexier underwear, and the girls understand the meaning of appeal. Justice Harman said that if he won, he hoped to travel, work with old people, and find them guilty. Peter, what doomweed proved to be all washed up?
Doomweed?
Doomweed.
Doomweed.
The Cumbrian coast looms in the sun.
Oh dear, the doomweed was all washed up by the radiation-filled... I have no idea, Barry, but I'm willing to spin it out for a while in the hope that my educated friend Richard Ingrams will jump in with the answer.
I will. It was the seaweed upon the beach. It wasn't in Scotland, was it?
No.
You're thinking of Prince Charles.
I was doing that for security reasons.
Very ingenious.
I was asked by Mossad to disguise my voice. Now you know the answer, don't fool us.
It's the seaweed on the beach at Sellafield.
That's right.
Which is perfectly safe to eat.
Except it was ticking at the time.
That's absolutely right. It's a Sellafield nuclear plant in Cumbria which found itself coming under attack from an invasion of the glowing hydroids, which are seaweed-like organisms and not what you get from sitting on cold surfaces. The contaminated material was washed up on a beach near the power station, though a spokesman for British Nuclear Fuels said, we don't know if they have any connection with Sellafield at all, really. Yes, the seaweed, 1,000 times more radioactive than normal, could have come from any one of the dozens of nuclear power stations which litter the Sellafield coastline. Tony, here's a piece of music for you. Well, that was Summer Holiday, sung by Kevin the Gerbil. The question is, who went off together on separate holidays?
Well, when I think of holidays, I always think of the Duchess of York, because she's always going on them. But I suspect it was another uniquely twinned royal set, Charles and Diana.
That's right.
It's very sad.
Sorry,
she keeps getting photographed against these 7 wonders of the world, which are all extremely large, even larger than her, and she's bound to look lonely. It's very sad. It was Taj Mahal last time. It's a Sphinx. It'll be the Colossus at Rhodes. His frail, suffering wife, while he's off picking his nose in Turkey or somewhere.
I was about to had a photograph of him in a skimpy black bathing costume.
It's in the week that the Duchess of York made a visit to Britain. All her in-laws decided to get out of the country. Charles and Diana greeted each other at the airport with the traditional royal call of, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" before finding that, due to some silly airline booking error, they were both on the same flight. Anyway, Alan, here's your question. Whose weightless endeavours succeeded eventually?
Oh, these are the 24-hour plumbernautes, called out by NASA and up there with their bicycle and ladder. And they cocked it up twice, and eventually they got hold of this thing manually and yanked it into... have they come down yet? I mean, is it dangerous to make jokes about these unfortunate fools who are up there? But they're pulling these all bits together so we can watch the Olympics.
Right.
Apparently it's the high jump satellite or something. It's a very small cog in the great Olympic wheel, and they've got to get it back or they'll all look very silly.
It's the Rogue satellite, which is orbiting the Earth at more than 20,000 miles away from where it should be, a bit like the Duchess of York, I suppose. After suffering what scientists call a booster rocket overdrive malfunction, which in layman's terms translates as flat battery, John. Intelsat 6 was rescued by astronauts from the Space Shuttle Endeavour in an operation so tense you could have heard a pin float. The 4-ton state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar telecommunications satellite was wrestled into the cargo bay for repairs after first being secured by a piece of equipment which scientists call a long pole with a small hook on the end. And the scores at the end of the second round are still tied at 8-all. We start round 3 with a cutting from the Yorkshire Evening Post.
John Munden has turned the tables on his arch-rival Tony Quinn in their race to be the last name in the Leeds telephone directory. Tony's telephone name of Zachariah Zukpster, which was bottom of the lists in the 1991 directory, only managed second to bottom place this time around, as John pipped him at the post with the name of Zebedee Zit.
Well, thank you, Anne Blaine from London, for sending us that. Richard, your question again. What thinly disguised feasts do a fat lot of good?
I think we probably shot our boat as far as answering these questions. We've done awfully well so far.
Well, I don't like to go into a sort of a triumphalist mood, but I think it's something to do with these awful ready-to-wear...
Ready-to-wear?
Ready-to-wear oven-bake, bung in the oven, freeze-dried, smaller portions, foodstuffs which can be bought at any supermarket. And their slimming achievement is because there's far less of them than normal. It's just a rotten old bit of stuff, but less of it, I think, is the answer.
Oh. You summed it up all pretty well. It's the news that healthy, low-calorie, ready-prepared meals make you fat, especially if you eat 20 a day. An examination by the Connery Protection Group revealed that labels such as controlled sodium actually means quite salty, and high in fibre means, frankly, a bit stringy. The food processors responded that the report was poorly conducted, incomplete and misleading, but shredded into a bowl with added cardboard and bits of gravel, it makes highly nutritious, fat-free muesli. Peter, you were so good on that. Have a listen to this.
Raphaël, Raphaël, dans ses bras soupire-t-elle, avec lui tant de zèle, n'est jamais exceptionnel, mais il se lasse et ça casse, vite une autre la remplace, infidèle au plus belle, ce n'est pas un saint Raphaël, non pas un saint Raphaël.
And la question est quoi?
Whose artistic fortune didn't have a renaissance?
Well, I think it was that Raphael, or not Raphael, which was unearthed from an attic somewhere and has been displayed to the world's press and art critics. It looks rather nice to me. It's like that little boy crying. If it's not a fake, it certainly manages to be better than one. I think somebody's trying to talk up the price of something he bought for sixpence.
Yeah. In fact, the only thing is that you can see all the numbers underneath. Where, but he bought it for 360 quid or something and said it's worth 10 million, or did he buy it for 10 million and it's now worth 360 quid? But it's something like that anyway.
It's part of the entrepreneurial society, Tony. Why can't you learn?
Well, I think Tony deserves a bonus for that. It's all about an amateur art collector and professional self-publicist, Lester Winwood, who tried to convince the public and press that a painting he bought for 360 quid is in fact a £10 million Raphael Madonna.
Nice one.
Asked for his educated opinion, the editor of Art Review magazine used all his cultural fine art expertise to produce a critique of the picture and pronounced that it absolutely stinks. Tony, what election fight turned out to be an election fight?
Oh, this was in the Italian Parliament, where Mussolini's daughter, I think... Granddaughter, thank you, his granddaughter, encouraged a number of very nasty fascist types to go round hanging people upside down off lampposts, and they got into a big fight anyway. It sort of reminded me of the British Parliament in its quieter moments. We got a few fascists in the British Parliament, of course, that, they're just somewhat more deeply embedded there rather than sort of strutting around with their jackboots on as they do apparently in the Italian Parliament.
They didn't have Mrs. Boothroyd to keep them in control.
Well, I think when you say fascist types, you mean well-dressed entrepreneurs.
Well, it's the same thing, yeah.
Yes, it's fighting which broke out among Italian MPs who gathered in the Rome Parliament to vote in the bi-weekly presidential election. Bubbly, vivacious, neo-fascist Alessandra Mussolini put her fingers in her mouth and let out a series of ear-piercing whistles. Alessandra Mussolini put her fingers in her mouth to let out a series of ear-piercing whistles. Funny, it doesn't get a laugh when you do it like that. But stayed well clear of the flying fists, exhibiting a degree of restraint which would have had our grandfather turning on his lamppost. Alan, who climbed into the top 30?
Climbed into the top. You're not talking about the Everest, are you? Oh, that. We don't say no, because he's nodding. I'm trying to help you. When we were little and opened our atlases, it said Everest was 29,002 feet. It's a lot more than that now, because it's got all these hamburgers and things on it. 30 people went up last week in various different expeditions, including a woman. Yes. Well, you look shocked. And it's absolutely filthy up there. It's terrible. Every time they come down, it's actually higher than it was before because of all the junk. So they have to keep on climbing it because it's a higher mountain than the highest mountain in the world after they've climbed the one that was.
It was Mount Everest's busiest single day when 30 climbers made it to the summit to desperate shouts of, "Stop pushing at the back!" Sir Edmund Hillary complained the mountain was being ruined by overcrowding. It was a bit like Christopher Columbus moaning about all those people who went to America. And the scores at the end of round 3 have changed very slightly because Richard and Peter have a well-earned 12, but Alan and Tony have crept into the lead with 13. Before we start the final round, here's a cutting from the Daily Star.
Gunmen robbed a drive-in cinema at Fort Wayne, Indiana, as it screened the film Drive-In, about a hold-up at a drive-in cinema.
Richard, here's a piece of music for you. Black Sheep by the Singing Sheep. The question is, who advertised the fact they had something to bleat about?
Well, I think this may be Prince Charles.
Indeed, but I don't think it is.
I don't think I've read any sheep stories.
Was this something to do with someone who answered an advertisement for a battery recharger or something and was sent a blown-up sheep, which I understand people use as a sex aid. Though what do you do with it? Perhaps Richard or Peter could tell us, but I...
Well, I think we leave that to the bishop.
Was that it?
That is it. Let me tell you all about it.
Trust a member of Parliament to know about that.
Give him a bonus for that. He deserves it. Yes, it's about the Southport couple who were invited to buy an inflatable sheep sex aid after answering an advertisement for rechargeable batteries in that salacious top-shelf publication, the Daily Telegraph. They received a mail shot inviting them to buy a Love You for the bargain price of £17.95. The drawing was accompanied by the description, "She has been developed to bring the joy of sheep into your love life without the obvious problems of a real sheep." No bleating to alert the neighbours. No risk of ruining your prize lawn, among other things. This game is a severe disappointment to the unnamed duo, and even more of a disappointment to the lonely ram in Derbyshire who got the batteries.
Ram bang, thank you, ma'am.
Dear me. Peter, your question. Who swore herself in at college?
Who swore herself in at college?
Princess
not Princess Margaret.
It's the dirty newsreader. The lady newsreader, who was in the debate.
Yes, delightful Pamela Armstrong.
Absolutely so.
Delightful Pamela Armstrong, who said, "I started at the bottom and I kissed it."
So she did.
Was she involved with the sheep as well?
It's a surprising story, really. It's the BBC's very own Pamela Armstrong who gave a speech at a college union debate which brought a whole new meaning to the expression Cambridge Blue. Students were shocked by the World Service broadcaster's broad language, which left something to be desired, like a single word that could actually be broadcast on the World Service. Listeners may be interested to know that a cassette tape is available with the offensive bits bleeped out. Mind you, it sounds just like half an hour of the Greenwich time signal. Tony, your question again. Whose first-class payment is worth threepence?
Ooh. That's got me there.
Very strange.
This first-class payment. Come on, you brains.
No, do I?
Yes, that brilliant.
Train story, is it?
No,
it's not.
It's a
stamp story.
It's a DSS story.
Oh, it'll be someone whose benefits are only threepence after, years, many years he's been somewhere. She has been... married? Yes. This is a woman who's been living with a sheep for some years. And this doesn't actually count as a form of common law marriage within the meaning of the Act. And in the Great Shakedown, her benefits are only 3p. No, we're not going to get anywhere.
I'll tell you what it is.
Is it the government's proposal that everyone on DSS is going to get threepence?
It might be the thin end of the wedge. Anyway, it's grandmother, Moti Ben Haria, who is being paid a state pension of threepence a week, an amount which shocked the retired shop assistant as, under present benefit rules, it was more than twice what she'd expected. The Department of Social Insecurity sends the 3p cheque to her by post with a first-class 24p stamp every week. Prompt payment that allows Mrs. Harrier to buy all of life's necessities, such as a 10th share of a pint of milk, and for a treat, the odd bag of chip. The 60-year-old from North London has written a letter of appeal to the DSS tribunal, and she is currently saving for a stamp to post it. It should mean her case is taken up in July 1996. Alan, what early riser has got something to crow about?
This is another barnyard filth story, isn't it? This is from Bideford, not a million miles from Torbay. In fact, it's probably the only lively and still virile thing in the area. It is a cockerel called Corky. And he's got 14 hens. And unlike a bishop, every time it does anything that it needs to with these hens, it cries out, rattles the rafters. And the bloke next door who moved in wasn't a rural man at all, was some fearful executive type, had moved in next door and was startled by this display of overt sexuality from across the fence. And he took out an order or an injunction, whatever you do with the noise abatement rat bags on faceless people they have down in Bideford. And they've stopped this cockerel from doing it. But all the people gather together. It's just like the Channel Islands story. The local people banded together and have given the cockerel its rights back. But I think, if I remember rightly, it has to keep away from the hens.
Yes,
or it will come up before the beak. It wasn't me, it was a headline in The Sun. No, it wasn't, it was me. Sorry.
This refers to Corky the cockerel from Devon, who can crow to his heart's content after a magistrate overturned a council decision to curtail his dawn chorus. A neighbour had complained that it was waking him up too early in the morning, especially when Corky's owner put the bird back an hour to mark the beginning of British summertime. Well, before we reveal the final scores, let's see what cuttings the team have brought along. Richard, have you got something amazing?
Well, one of my colleagues on the Oldie drew my attention to an unusual headline in the Daily Mirror last week. It says, "Man throws Rottweiler into car full of Asians. But I'm not a bigot," he says.
Peter, what have you got?
One of my live-in lovers from Private Eye drew to my attention something from the Wrexham and Moco Mail. Thieves broke into the B&Q store on Burst Road, Wrexham, on Wednesday. After deactivating the burglar alarm, the thieves got away with a quantity of burglar alarms.
Tony, what have you got, Bruce?
This is a cutting about said bishop that we've been having a bit of fun with. Well, someone's had some fun with him, that's for sure. Bishop Joseph Duffy of Clwyd, the church's official spokesman in Ireland, refused to speculate whether there would be an inquiry into the scandal. Last night, Dr. Casey was reported to be in El Salvador, Central America, where he plans to act in some sort of missionary position. must be true because it's from the News of the World, May the 10th.
Alan, what have you brought?
Oh, it can only get worse. It's exactly the same sort of thing. It's from the Daily Mail on Tuesday. It says, wearing a lace garter over black stockings, mini-skirted Sheila Ford kept a date yesterday at the High Court. Dressed as a French maid, 35-year-old Miss Ford was told that prostitutes do have to pay income tax. She claimed that money earned illegally was not subject to such deductions. Unmoved, Mr. Registrar James made a bankruptcy order for £44,000 due on immoral earnings, which the Inland Revenue estimated £150,000 a year. Announcing that she would appeal, Miss Ford said, "Don't think I'm taking this lying down."
Well, thank you. Let's look at the final scores, which, well, I thought you were going to make it, chaps, but tradition has, I'm afraid, won again because Richard and Peter have got a terrific 15, but Alan and Tony an even better 16, and win not only this programme but the series. Before we leave you, here's news from the Eastern Daily Press, sent to us by R. Lansell of King's Lynn.
Several people needed hospital treatment yesterday after an explosion at an Indian restaurant. A Scotland Yard spokesman said the blast wasn't believed to be suspicious and was being treated as a possible gas explosion.
Goodbye.
Taking part in the news quiz were Richard Ingrams, Alan Corran, Peter Cook and Tony Banks. The chairman was Barry Took and the news was read by me, Katrina Young. The programme was written by Ian Pattinson and Robert Fraser-Steele and the producer was Colin Swart.
And here to introduce the program and the panel is Jack Longman.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and the two teams taking part tonight are on my left, Miss Arnott Robertson and Frank Muir, and on my right, Miss Nancy Spain and Dennis Norton. And we go straight into round one, which is a test of vocabulary, and what I do is to ask each member of the team in turn to explain the meaning of a word and a mark if they get it right. Arnott Robertson, I want to know the meaning of the word sib.
Sib?
Yes, S-I-B. Sib.
Oh, well, now, if you had a cousin called Sybil and you went up to her and said, "Hello, Sib," you might be calling her by her name or by the relationship. It just means a relation.
Yes, I think you get there.
Yes, I jolly well think I get there. That's right, Jack.
Well,
it's a relationship.
She knows.
Kindred.
What I've been told is that this is archaic and Scottish. Now, you're not archaic, but you are Scottish, so I give you a mark. And now, Dennis Norton, I want to know the meaning of the word inimical.
Inimical. I tell you what that is. I have a small daughter who eats lettuce. Doesn't eat anything else. And she won't eat the lettuce unless she has mayonnaise on it. You know, it's very hard to dollop out the mayonnaise from a bottle. And you say to her, "Where do you want the mayonnaise, Margaret? At the side? At the front?" And she says, "No, in the mickle."
Any second thoughts?
Well, can I write it down? I-N-I-M-I-C...
I-L.
I-L?
Sorry, A-L, as it were.
Oh, yes. That means unamicable.
Yes.
Unfriendly.
Unfriendly, yes. Not friends. Nancy Spain, what is a shroff? I can't even pronounce it. Shroff. S-H-R-O-F-F. Shroff.
A shroff? Well, it's the thing that horses drink out of.
I certainly don't think you'll beat that one, Nancy. As a matter of fact, it is a money changer or banker in India, and a chap who is so expert that he can detect the many base coins that used to circulate in those parts.
That's why he shroffs at the mouth, I
He shroffs at the mouth. Frank Muir, what is a notochord? N-O-T-O-C-H-O-R-D. Or the notochord, perhaps it would be fairer.
It's a well-known expression. It's the only chord that can be played on the pedals of a cinema organ by an organist with no toes.
Mr. Pobble, no doubt. No, it is in fact your spinal column. Or rather the cartilaginous band which goes at the basis of your
Well, a
spinal
band,
column.
I was near. This is a cinema organ. We placed bands, you know.
No, regard Arnold Robertson. What is a sambur? S-A-M-B-U-R.
It's a kind of a deer out of which shoes are made. At least I've got a pair of shoes which are made out of that deer skin, samba. In India.
India, it is.
Yeah.
Well done. Dennis Norton, what is a prothalamium?
Prothalamium was written by Edmund Spenser, and I forget what it was about. It's a dreary, but it's got the word eftsoons in it. I remember
Yes.
that. And, there was a terrible note to say that he also wrote an epithalamium.
Yes.
Which, and I think the note ran something like, is omitted with great reluctance as being not in accord with modern manners. And he wrote the epithalamium to his wife.
Yes, and what would he write the prothalamium to?
Someone else's wife.
No, it's a marriage song.
Marriage song. Yes,
And
that's
the
it. That's right.
epithalamium is a
When he
funeral
was, yes,
song.
yes.
Yes, I think you get it. Prothalamium is the song that is sung before you get married. Epithalamium is what you sing afterwards, and as Dennis Norton so rightly says, it isn't always publishable. Nancy Spain, and this is terribly easy, what is a fichu?
It's one of those white jobs that you wear around your neck.
Yes, small shawl, sometimes of lace, though not in Nancy's case, worn on the shoulders or neck by ladies. And Frank Muir, what is a doppelganger or doppelganger, whichever you prefer?
Doppelganger, it's got an umlaut over the A.
That's right.
It's a very fragrant piece of Gothic hagology, this is. Doppelganger, it's a bit of good old Teutonic horror, whereby a man's ghost walks with him all the time.
Yes, absolutely right. Yes, it's the wraith or ghost of somebody who is living. Well, pretty good, I thought that was.
I thought it wasn't bad.
We go on to round two, which is quickies, and it's about mountains. And what I want to know is, at what mount or mountain did the following things happen? Arnold Robertson, the mountain on which the ancient gods of mythology had their summit talks.
Olympus.
Yes, in Greece, real mountain. Dennis Norton, the traditional resting place of Noah's Ark after the flood.
Ararat.
Yes.
Ararat.
Quite a number of expeditions were sent there in Victorian times to find bits of the Ark in Turkey. Nancy Spain, the mount where the Temple of the Muses was built, and where the Muses foregathered.
Now they ask me things like that, you know. You'll get things like Ararat.
I know, there just ain't no justice.
Oh, I do know, though. Parnassus.
Now, bad luck, it's Helicon.
Yes, that's right.
Isn't it?
Frank Muir, which mountains sweep down to the sea?
For I'll wait for the wild rose that waits there for me, where the mountains of morn.
Quite right. Well, we pass on hastily to round three. In this round, I give each member of the team a quotation, and then I ask them to complete it, the following line or lines, and a mark for completing it correctly, and a mark for saying where it comes from. Arnold Robertson, the line or lines following this one, how far that little candle throws his beams.
So shines a good deed in a naughty world.
Yes, where from?
Milton.
No, you get your 1 mark. No, it's Portia and the Merchant of Venice. Coming back to Belmont after great success in her QC trial, and she said, that light we see is burning in my hall. How far that little candle throws his beams, so shines a good deed in a naughty world. Dennis Norton, beware the pine tree's withered branch. Beware, branch, if you prefer it.
Yes, I'll have branch, because it's avalanche. Yes. Beware the awful avalanche.
Yes, from?
From the youth who born with snow and ice, a banana with a strange device.
Yes, but who wrote it?
Longfellow.
Absolutely right.
Johann
yes.
Sebastian.
It's Excelsior, or perhaps there's room at the top. Nancy Spain. But where his rude hut by the Danube lay, there were his young barbarians all at play.
Butchered to make a Roman holiday.
Yes.
Well, it's Byron, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's Childy Harold.
Yes. But where his rude hut by the Danube lay, there were his young barbarians all at play. There was their Dacian mother, he, their sire, butchered to make a Roman holiday. The dying gladiator out of Childe Harold. Frank Muir, will you walk into my parlour, said a spider to a fly.
'Tis the nicest little parlour that ever you did spy.
Prettiest, actually.
Nicest little parlour that
No,
you
not
ever did
nicest.
prettiest.
I give up. Who wrote it?
Mary Webb.
I'm going to give you half a mark for getting the Christian name right.
Oh, in which case I'll accept your offer and bow out.
It was by Mary Howitt, who wrote in the 19th century The Spider and the Fly, and also something called Buttercups and Daisies. Well, now, around 4, this is pretty easy. I want the name of the commander of the following famous ships, and why the ship was famous. Arnold Robertson, the Golden Hind.
Drake.
And why was it famous?
Because, wait a minute, what did he do in the Golden Hind?
Sailed.
Yes, he must have done something about singeing the, king's...
He sailed on and on and on.
Oh, so he did, but he didn't find America. What did he find at the other end? That was Columbus, wasn't it?
Yes.
So bad at history.
He found that the world was round, Arnold. He went right round the
Oh,
world
right round
in the
the
Golden
other side.
Hind.
And wait a minute, the ship wasn't
Circumnavigated
called
the
the
globe.
Golden Hind all the time. It was called the Penelope till halfway round, and then for some unknown reason he christened it the Golden Hind.
Johnny nearly gave you a bonus mark for that. It wasn't, in fact. It was called the Pelican.
Oh, well, started with B.
Dennis Norton, the Argo.
The Argosy. Of
No,
the
the
Argosy.
Argo.
Yes, the Argo of the where the Argonauts sailed
That's
on
it.
their Argosy.
Yes, but who was the commander-in-chief?
Jason?
Yes, Nancy Spade, the Revenge.
Sir Richard Grenville lay.
Yes.
Pinnace like a fluttered bird came flying from far away. Spanish ships of war have sighted. We have 23.
Cut.
What was he doing? What was he doing in the Revenge? It's
He was
like the great god Pan, isn't it?
He was fighting 53 Spaniards. So that's quite right. It was his ship, and a very famous fight. Tennyson wrote about it.
Was he?
Frank Muir, the Endeavour.
Was that an Arctic or Antarctic vessel?
Yes, I'd give you that.
And was it Shackleton?
Yes. You get your mark, Frank. I don't even remember that there was an earlier ship from which Shackleton named it. Her.
Endeavour 1.
Yes, Endeavour 1.
No, Endeavour got stuck in the ice. didn't
That's it.
And
yes.
crushed.
Yes, and crushed. And Shackleton did his famous small boat journey to Elephant Island and South Georgia. But it was, first of all, the ship of Captain Cook when he made his
Oh, yes,
exploration
it took
in the
Dick Bentley
Pacific.
over to Australia, wasn't it?
Won't go on with that. You get your mark. And now, round 5 is well-known expressions. I want to know what they mean and where they come from. Arnold Robertson, by the skin of my teeth.
Well, it means that you only just did it, whatever it was. You got there in time, or you saved your life, or you didn't put your money on the wrong horse.
Mm-hmm.
And I presume it comes from the time when people had rather dirtier teeth than they have now, and therefore the skin was slightly thicker. And it means that you did it by a very, very narrow margin, because even the dirtiest teeth, the skin is pretty thin.
This is a brilliant explanation, but it still doesn't tell me where the phrase comes from.
Oh, do you mean who used it first?
Yes.
Wilder.
Well, now, I should think it's trad. Traditional.
No, I'm
or
sorry.
ibid.
It comes from the Bible. It's Job. And Job is bewailing the fact that the hand of God is so strongly turned against him. And he gives a most terrible list of punishments and sufferings that he's had to endure. And he finishes up by saying, my bone cleaveth to my skin and to my flesh, and I am escaped with the skin of my teeth. And that, so far as we know, is the first time the phrase was used. Half a mark on it. Dennis Norton, to take a message to... Well, I don't know how to call this, but to take a message to Garcia or Garcia, whichever you prefer.
This must be a very commonly used phrase if we don't know how to pronounce it. It's an American phrase.
Yes.
And it means to go on a very difficult journey where there's a lot of hazards in the way.
Yes, and to...
Come back.
Come back again.
Yes. Yes, you've got the meaning near enough.
And
to be
it's somebody
resourceful and courageous, to be able to carry out a very difficult task and carry it through successfully.
And the origin, there was a man called Garcia, who was a general of an army, and
Yes.
somebody else had to take a message to him.
Yes.
He crossed 5,000 miles, approximately it was, swamp, rivers, mountains. Finally staggered up to the general with 2 bullets in him, and he said, "I have a message from the commander of the other forces." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Happy birthday."
3/4 of a mark for sheer audacity. The phrase comes from an American lieutenant who was called Andrew Rowan, and in the Spanish-American War at the end of last century, in 1898, he made his way through the Spanish blockade into Cuba, contacted this General Garcia, whom Dennis quite rightly refers to as being a general of opposing forces, general of the insurgents there, and then got his way all the way back to Washington with the reply. Apparently they weren't able to use the telegraph. Nancy Spain, the phrase, "If the mountain won't come to Mahomet, Mahomet must go to the mountain."
Well, it means that when you have some insupportable task, you have to go and out to do the task rather than bringing the task back to you.
Half, I think. If you can't get your own way, then you must bow to the inevitable, make the best of it. And when Muhammad was introducing his religious reforms and his system, the Arabs asked that what he claimed should be supported by some miraculous proof. So he ordered a mountain which was called Mount Safa to move and come over to him. And of course it didn't. And he then said to these unbelieving chaps, "God is merciful. Had the mountain obeyed my words, it would have fallen on us to our destruction. I will therefore go to the mountain and thank God that he has had mercy on a stiff-necked generation." Rather nice story. Frank Muir, it's all plain sailing.
I'm not a sailing man, Jack, but the explanation is, I mean, the meaning is that the general usage is that difficulties have been overcome,
Yes.
and the rest of the way is open and simple.
Yes.
Plain sailing, planing when sailing, means that if the boat's shape is such, when
Yeah.
it reaches a certain speed, it ceases to displace its own weight and rises, and there is less surface tension, and it goes very much faster, and that is known as planing in sailing.
Yes, but this phrase was invented before they had that kind of hydroplane. Matter of fact, it was an assumption for navigation, simple navigation. You assumed
navigation.
that the Earth was flat, that is a plane surface.
Well, it is, isn't it?
Rather than round. And you got roughly to where you wanted to go by pretending that the Earth was flat. It meant your calculations were altogether much more simple arithmetically.
They were most incorrect, actually.
Yes, but roughly you got there. Now we pass into round 6, again a round of quickies. I wanted to know who created the following captains in fiction. 1 mark for each. Arnold Robertson, Captain Cuttle.
Oh, Captain Cuttle. Never heard of Captain Cuttle. Have you heard of Captain Cuttle?
Cuttlefish.
Yeah. No, we don't. We
He's
haven't
in
heard of Captain.
Charles Dickens. He's the old one-armed sea captain in Dombey and Son, and he had one favourite expression, "When found, make a note of," which I recommend to you on it.
What a beastly thing to say.
Dennis Norden, Captain Stanhope.
Stanhope. Yes. Journey's End, isn't it?
Yes.
Must you sit on his bed? Yes.
That's
it. You know that line? Clive Brooke. What's his name?
Sheriff.
R.C. Sheriff.
R.C. Sheriff. He's the commanding officer of the group of men and officers in Journey's End by Sheriff. Nancy Spain, Captain Carvalho.
My friend here says it's a play.
Yes.
Yeah. It's by an Irishman.
Yes.
Well, then it's probably,
I think it's the youngest playwright.
What, lately, you mean?
Very lately, yes.
I think only half a mark. He is the hero of the play named after him by Dennis Cannon.
Dennis Cannon.
Dennis Cannon.
Frank Muir, Captain Blood.
Oh, yes. He was Raphael. This is a name I never say and always read, isn't it? Raphael Sabatini.
Yes.
Also a play.
Yes. There was a real Captain Blood who tried to steal the crown jewels in Charles II's time and more or less got away with it.
Played by Errol Flynn, I
But the
remember.
fictional character is Raphael Sabatini. That's quite right. Well, now we come on to the last round, and this is much more complicated, and I want some help from the audience. Here we ask Arnott Robertson and Nancy Spain each to identify a quotation, and while they're doing that, we invite Frank Muir and Dennis Norden to think up a situation to which the original phrase might have applied, so that 1 mark each for a correct answer from Arnott and Nancy, and a mark to either Frank Muir or to Dennis Norden for you to award by your applause or otherwise. Now, the first one, to Arnott Robertson, with Frank Muir listening in. I have you on the hip.
It's said to Shylock.
Yes, it's in the trial scene, and it's said by that rather nasty character, who probably was Christian, but very little else, Gratiano, who said when Portia was doing her QC stuff, now, infidel, I have you on the hip. Well, while Frank Muir is thinking better about that, we come on to the second phrase for Nancy Spain to identify. I won't quarrel with my bread and butter.
I've always wanted to know who said that. I so
You will,
agree.
Nancy, you will.
Well, I suppose you're just writing that down.
I'm just writing that down, some notes, and I've got to buy a loaf of bread before I get home. And all sorts of...
Don't forget the beetroot.
Mm.
I haven't the faintest idea, Jack.
Now, it's Dean Swift in Polite Conversations, and so far as I know, this is the first time this phrase of bread and butter used in the sense of my living was used in literature. Well, now back to Frank Muir and the phrase, I have you on the hip.
I have you... do you know, I don't think there's anybody from Mozambique to the cold grey harbour of Reykjavik who doesn't know the story of old Sticky Warburton. So as everybody knows it, I want to tell you another story. This is about a wedding I went to. Now, I don't normally like going to weddings. I went to my own. I think one has to, you know. But I don't normally like it. But on this occasion, I went with a friend of mine called Jimmy Edwards. You probably haven't heard the name. He's a kind of comedian, very sort of inconspicuous, gentle sort of chap. And it was during the period when he was engaged, during one of the periods when he was engaged. And he wanted me to go along with him because he wanted to see what happened at weddings, what was going to happen to him, you see. And I went along. Now, I don't know whether you're the same, but most of us have compulsions. I mean, some people, for instance, at these sort of functions are ussers, you know. When people sing for he's a jolly good fellow, when it comes to, and so say all of us, they always go, us, and so say all of us, us, you see. Well, they're ussers. And later on in these functions, you have the Deaners. I mean, when the wine has flowed a little and they sing Nellie Dean, he's the one who always sings, Nellie Deaner. Well, they're Deaners. Well, I am a hip-hipper, you see. At any function, I can't be restrained from saying, 3 cheers for the bride, hip-hip-hip, you see. And the trouble is I have to be restrained because on the hooray, I always spill my champagne over somebody. The only time I don't spill my champagne over somebody is when there isn't any champagne and I spill something else over somebody. So Jimmy Edwards said, now, I'm going to ask you to come to this wedding with me, but for heaven's sake, don't start raising cheers to the bride or you'll spill champagne over everybody and it'll be the most fearful mess. So I promised. And I went to the church with him and we sat through the service. Very nice it was, too. The nice sentimental atmosphere of a wedding is like breathing golden syrup. And when we got to the point in the service where the bridegroom said, with all my worldly goods I thee endow, Jimmy Edwards went white and had to be helped out of the church. and it's the last we saw of him, so I went on to the reception on my own, without Jimmy's restraining influence. And they're jolly nice people, the bride and groom, you know. The groom was an advertising chap for Pericles Tires. I don't know whether you know them. He was the one who did the slogan, Pericles, the Prince of Tires, you know. And she was a sort of artist, very artistic girl. She did very primitive things with damp blobs of clay. And there they were, very happily married, you see, and there was a photographer standing by, And, of course, the old compulsion came over me, and I said, everybody, 3 cheers for the bride. Hip, 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 hooray, you see. And on the hooray, of course, as usual, I whisked up my glass of champagne. It caught in the fountain pen clip in the pocket of the bride's father, and all down the bride's dress went the champagne, and the flashbulb went, and there was the photographer, and he came over and said, I've taken a very nice photograph of you. And I said, oh, no. What's your name? And he said, my name is Sticky Warburton, as a matter of fact. Why do you ask? I said, well, I just wanted to know, because please destroy the photograph, because on the hooray, we were all doing like this, you see. And he said, oh, that's all right. I didn't take you on the hooray. I have you on the hip.
Keep Frank Muir away from weddings in future. And now we go on to Dennis. I won't quarrel with my bread and butter.
Well, of course, this was said by Jonathan Swift. I'm not denying that, and my case does not rest on that at all. But it was said at another time by a man whom I think some tribute should be paid at this point or juncture. The man is Edward J. Mason, who every week compiles the programs, compiles all the questions. And what people don't know is that Edward J. Mason, Captain Edward J. Mason, as he's known, had a very distinguished war record. In fact, they were going to film his war. He was going to be played by Anna Neagle. But all I heard when I asked about it, they said it fell through. They didn't tell me what fell through, but Miss Neagle's all right, so it must have been something to do with Edward J. Mason. But this war experience of his was rather interesting because, although only a young man, he'd only been in the army, I think it was about 18 months, and already he'd quite named himself. He'd blown up 3 ammunition dumps and 2 airfields, and then he was sent overseas. And the idea was that he was to work in France, creating alarm and despondency among the occupying troops by broadcasting on the Freedom Radio panel games. So he was dropped into France, what the services call the hard way, that's without a parachute, and he set up these programs, and he did hit on one program called More Mo, which is quite untranslatable into English. But the idea was that certain people were asked to name the origins of phrases or the next line of a quotation. But what wasn't generally known was that the quotations that were chosen had a special meaning to British intelligence, who monitored them, you see. So that if they said, Earth has not shown anything to show more fair, then that would mean that 3 troop transports coming through, be ready, boys, on the 19th. They had this whole code, you see, and it was listened to in a little room in Maida Vale. As you know, there's all sorts of odd things going on in little rooms in Maida Vale, but at this time it was listened to, and he did very well and passed a lot of information back, till one day he had this very important message which was coded into the quotation, I won't quarrel with my bread and butter. He had this on a slip of paper and was just about to broadcast it when there was a knocking on the door. I mustn't forget that loaf of bread to take home. You will remind me, yes, and the beetroot, yes. There was a knocking on the door, and in burst the enemy. Well, luckily, Mason knew that whatever happened, the code mustn't be captured, so he took this piece of paper with, I won't quarrel with my bread and butter written on it, and he swallowed it. Well, it's not a very nice death, being choked to death by a quotation. And when the news got back, they said, well, Mason's had it, choked to death on I won't quarrel with my bread and butter. And they said, well, thank heavens, it may have been brutish, but it was swift.
I think Dennis Norden wins that by the skin of his teeth.
But should just say, Ted, that he didn't really die. He lived on, and he writes The Archers now, but you can't really call that living.
Well, that brings the final score at the end to Nancy Spain and Dennis Norden, 17 1/4, and Arnott Robertson and Frank Muir, 15.
In My Word, you heard E. Arnott Robertson, Nancy Spain, Frank Muir and Dennis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland. The programme was devised by Tony Schreier and Edward J. Mason.
My Word.
Panel game devised by Tony Shrine and Edward J. Mason. And here to introduce the teams is Michael O'Donnell.
Thank you very much, and welcome to another exhibition of verbal calisthenics performed by our teams of outstanding calisthenical competitors, Frank Muir and Dilys Powell. And Dennis Norden and Antonia Fraser. And their first exercise, as always, is a matter of definition. Frank, what's the meaning of izzard? I-Z-Z-A-R-D.
It's a lizard that's passed its driving license.
In fact, it's a now obsolete name for the letter...
You asked me obsolete terms.
Well, you're rather good on them, usually. Obsolete name for the letter Z, or Z.
Is it?
Antonia, what's the meaning of postulant? P-O-S-T-U-L-A-N-T.
Oh, well, as a former convent girl, that is one, though not as a former nun, that is one word no, I mean, in a convent it means someone who is seeking to become a nun. And I suppose the strict meaning of it is seeking something, isn't it?
Yes, that'll win you 2 marks. Well done. It's one who asks or petitions for something, a candidate, especially a candidate for admission to a religious order. 2 marks, Antonia. Dilys, the meaning of cerebellum. C-E-R-E-B-E-L-L-U-M.
It's to do with the mind or the brain.
Yes, it is to do with the brain,
With the
more
brain.
than the mind, probably.
It's a bit of the brain.
It is, in fact, the bit of the brain that's largely concerned with balance and your sense of where you are in space. Dennis, the meaning of nexus, N-E-X-U-S.
That's one of those words I've only got to see it, and I stopped reading. The rest of it. It's a giveaway word, actually, because you generally read about the socio-economic nexus or the military-industrial nexus, and it shows it's written by the sort of man who would use that sort of language. I don't know what it's a kind of tie-up between two things. An interface. An
ongoing relationship, in fact, it is, by the same man. But you've got your 2 marks because it's a bond or link or interconnected group. So we give you 2 marks. Now, before we go on to round 2, here, Frank and Dennis, are the quotations you're given for the last round. And Frank's is, "Oh dear, what can the matter be?" And Dennis, "Every little movement has a meaning of its own," from the 1910 Broadway musical Madame Sherry. Meanwhile, a roundup, Peter Moore says, of horses. Frank, an autobiography was published in 1877 which purported to be written by a horse. What was its title?
By a horse? Ad hoc.
Oh, yes. No, it's not National Velvet.
No, it's the other one.
It's the other one. It's Black Beauty and Azure.
Well done. 2 marks for Frank.
I was waiting for you.
Yeah, the horse also wrote Eric or Bit by Bit.
Or Frank, St. Winifred's or the Weldon School.
Antonia, your question calls on your considerable knowledge of science and engineering. What, in mechanical terms, is the definition of 1 horsepower?
I knew you were going to ask me that question.
It's expressed in the... it's the power needed to raise a certain poundage, 1 foot, in 1 second. Just give me the number of pounds that a horse raises 1 foot in 1 second, and you get...
I will. Don't let's hurry it. It took
much better
years.
than pounds, actually, is pence. If you have 10 pence, you put it in a phone box, you get the AA, they raise 10 pounds. Very quickly.
Well, it's not 551 pounds, and it's not 549 pounds. It lies somewhere between those limits.
Well, only a fool would guess £550, but as
but
I'm
many
a
a fool is right, and many a fool wins 2 marks, and you win 2 marks.
Thank you very much. Isn't our chairman lovely? Who will disagree?
Dilys, what was unique about a horse by the name of either Incitatus or Incitatus, depending on whether it was Father McAvoy or Father Ray who was teaching me at the time? Anyway, it's Incitatus.
A-T which?
U-S.
U-N. Incitatus.
Incitatus.
Oh, it's a classical horse.
Yes.
Ah, there were a lot of famous horses there.
This one got rather favoured treatment.
Was it the one?
Because he's his owner.
Ah.
Was it made
yes, it was made as an emperor or a god or something.
Well, not quite.
Was elevated.
Yes, elevated. Made a priest and a consul.
Yes. It was oh dear, whose horse? Caligula's horse.
That's right. That'll get you 2 marks.
Caligula's horse.
Fed from an ivory manger and drank wine from a golden pail. Lucky horse. Well done. 2 marks to do. Dennis. King Richard III, Act 5, Scene 4. Alarums and excursions without, enter the king. He says...
A horse, my kingdom for a horse.
And I say 2 marks, Dennis.
By golly, he won through there.
A round of inscriptions. Frank, the Latin words meaning by perseverance I conquer is embossed upon a certain article to be found in many a bathroom.
It's our downstairs loo. You've got to pull the handle very slowly through 30 degrees, release it, and then push it very swiftly as far as it'll go. And if people get that sequence slightly out of order, it doesn't work. So it's by perseverance, you've got to keep at it. And we put under this, not in Latin, but in English, by perseverance I conquer.
That's 2 marks. 2 marks. And of course, you got the label off a bar of coal tar soap, didn't you? To stick on the because that's where it is actually on the label of a well-known brand of coal tar soap.
I don't know who we're kidding. There is only one well-known brand.
Antonia, a little romantic tale for you. Sir Walter Raleigh is said to have scratched the following line upon a window pane. Fain would I climb, yet fear I to fall. Subsequently, Queen Elizabeth I is said to have scratched another line beneath it. Can you remember what line she scratched beneath it?
It's something like those who fear too much, do not climb at all.
That's getting... Yes, it is. That you've really brought it into the modern vernacular.
Well, that's what I was trying to do.
Yes.
It's really my mission. You
Yes.
know?
Yes, well, I think you succeeded admirably. I mean, she scratched, if thy heart fails thee, climb not at all. You made
That's
it
so
much-
old-fashioned these days, I think.
Yes, it sort of has an Elizabethan touch to it.
It's really sort of faintly interesting, the Elizabethan graffiti, which in fact lasted a couple of hundred years of scratching graffiti on glass with a diamond. It lasted right down until the end of the 17th century at least.
Dilys, where was written, though in a foreign language, the words which, when translated, read, "Abandon hope, all ye that enter here"?
It's the BBC, remember this?
Still there.
It's somewhere in Venice. It's in Venice, isn't it?
According to Dante, it was over the gates of hell in the Inferno. Dennis, we're going to draw on your biblical knowledge here again. Part of the 14th verse of the 14th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy is printed or embossed upon a tin of a well-known brand of golden syrup. What is the quotation?
Well, it's something out of sweet... The word sweetness comes in. Out of sweetness cometh forth strength, was it?
The other way round. Try it the other way round.
Out of strength cometh forth sweetness.
That'll do for 2 marks, yes. It in fact says, out of the strong came forth sweetness, and that actually illustrates, or is illustrated by a drawing. It's in fact, officially, a picture of bees swarming over the abdomen of a dead lion.
Yes.
Which is an interesting way to sell golden syrup. A round of 3-word quotations. Can you quote the line or lines of poetry that contain the following sequence of words? Frank, all our yesterdays.
Oh yes, it was a television program, and it was a story about the First World War by H.M. Tomlinson, which I've never read, but pops up, has a very vigorous life in out-of-print catalogues, and it's Macbeth.
Yes.
It's a marvellous title for a book about the First World War, which Tomlinson's was, if I can remember. It's when Macbeth is told that his queen has dropped off the twig.
That's right. The queen, my lord, is dead.
But it's all our yesterdays have lighted falls the path to dusty death.
The way
out,
to dusty.
Out, brief candle.
Antonia, the silent dust.
Oh, it's going to be Jolly O'Grey,
Yes,
isn't it?
Jolly O'Grey.
Not for the first time on this programme, to be frank. It's something about smelling sweeter and all of that.
It's in the stanza that starts, can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath continue? Can honour's voice provoke?
The silent dust.
Well done, 2 marks.
I couldn't have managed like Dennis.
Or flattery soothe the dull cold air of death. We'll give you 2 marks for that. Well
It's
done.
one of the less memorable bits, actually.
It is. That's why it's in this programme.
I know.
But we generally have the memorable bits.
Yes,
That's what's so unfair.
What happened to the ploughman plodding?
Right.
Dilys, triumph and disaster.
Oh, that's Kipling.
Yes.
Yes, and treat those 2 impostors just the same. It's out of if.
Well done. 2 marks for Dilys. Dennis, a ghostly batsman. Where does those?
Oh
where do
yes,
those
this is what cricketers get maudlin about. It's oh my Hornby and my Barlow long ago, and it's the ghost, the run stealers flickering to and fro, and
Can you remember the poet?
It's Francis Thompson, isn't it? Yeah.
Well done. Yes, we'll give you your 2 marks. It's a very short poem, in fact.
It's actually rather moving. I think it's one of the good bad poems.
The Hornby and Barlow in this. For years I thought the Hornby was the train.
Yeah.
Because it was one of our by heart at school. Anyway, Dennis got two well-earned marks there for tracking that down. We now come to Frank's quotation, "Oh dear, what can the matter be?"
I was singing this the other day. Oh dear, what can the matter be? My wife's birthday's next Saturday. It's that awful problem of buying birthday presents for your dear lady. You know, normally, she doesn't like to have elaborate things. I usually give her something for the house that we both can share, like half a pound of pipe tobacco or a couple of pink ties. But this year, I really thought, no, next Saturday I must give her something much more interesting. And her big interest is the garden. I thought, if I could buy her some things from the garden. And she's a very practical girl, so it's not a dozen roses or something, rose trees, which I get all wrong and plant upside down or something. I'd get her some practical things. So I found in the local paper a thing called a car boot sale. And I thought, special boots to wear in the car. Might be an idea. I went along, and it's not that at all. It's a lot of strange-looking chaps with a car boot open, selling a lot of things, like a white elephant stall. There weren't any white elephants there because, the car boots. And the first thing I bought, I looked around, there's a strange lot of thrown-out stuff, and I thought, some of this must be useful. And then the first thing I bought my wife was a little picture. It's a lovely little picture, about 8 inches by 6, and it showed a chap in uniform, in the hot sun, sitting in front of a tent. And he was at a table, and he was writing and looking at a photograph of a girl. And his tunic neck was undone. And there was wording, it's all a bit stained, actually, the picture. But I managed to see the wording on the left. It said, "A pause in the Matabele War." And on the right, there were more wording, and it said, "Purveyors of soap to Her Majesty Queen Alexandra." So I bought this, because I thought that'll be marvellous for the garden, because my wife's greenhouse is too small. And I thought, if we throw away the picture of the Matabele War, she'll then have a piece of glass, 8 inches by 6, which would surely be just the thing for forcing mustard and cress. And so I bought that, and I moved on, and she's always complaining about that buckets and things aren't big enough nowadays, little plastic buckets, for carrying water around the garden to water the faraway stuff. And there was there, in this chap's car boot, one of those old Victorian hot water cans, the flip-flop lid. They were galvanized, and a very short but very fat spout, and which held 4 gallons of water, the chap told me. So I bought it. I hadn't got a handle, but I got it for only 20p, which I thought was very reasonable. So I had this thing for holding water, and then the lust of buying thing crept into me, and I couldn't stop there. And the chap said he had some wonderful fertilizer, and it was very, very strange, old-looking sack, small sack. And it said, Wonder DR Compound, the horticulturalists Vade Mecum. And I said, what's that? He said, well, it's DR, it's dung revivified. and on the back, it said that they got this new process of getting dung from the home counties, from the gentry, and they revivified it with dried seaweed and magnetism. And I thought that'd be marvellous. Unfortunately, there's a hole in the sack, and there was only about a teaspoonful left. But I got that for 15p. So I had the RD revivifier, as well as the hot water can, and the picture of the Matabele War, which I was going to throw away and keep the glass. But then I said to a chap there who had a whole lot of stuff in his car, have you got a swan-necked hoe? Now, you can't get swan-necked hoes now. They've disappeared. They're the one with a wonderful little bit of iron which curves away in the shape of a swan's neck, and the blade which sort of points towards the operator on the end of a long handle. And I said, have you? He said, of course we have, Gov. Of course I've got a swan-necked hoe. And in fact, he said, words he said it very loudly, as though to the other people, his friends. He said, I've got a right one here. So I joined him, And I bought his swan-necked hoe, and that was quite a lot. That was 38p. It was, he'd lost the metal bit at the end. And it was just the hand. But I'm sure my wife will appreciate that it's an incomplete swan-necked hoe with a swan-necked hoe. So I've got these items for my wife. So next Saturday, I'm not worried, and I'm not singing to myself, "Oh dear, what can the matter be?" Because I've got the items. So I'll sing to a different tune, actually the same tune, but different words. I'm now singing, looking forward to next Saturday. Here's what I've got you, my dear. "Oh dear, what can the matter be?"
Or something similar.
Something very similar.
Well done, Frank. Confirmed my worst suspicions about car boot sales. Dennis, let's see how you get on with "Every little movement has a meaning of its own."
I had another twinge of my old trouble the other day. I picked up a newspaper and was immediately confronted by a headline that said, "Public borrowing down." And I found myself wondering, why on earth would members of the public want to borrow down? Could it be because so many of them are now going in for duvets? And if that is the case, and it's expensive, this is why they're borrowing it, could we get to a position where down is up? And that feeling of vague confusion became even worse when on the arts page I came across an article that was headed, "Picasso draws large crowds." I suppose it's changed from doing individual portraits. But as any regular listener will have immediately diagnosed, I'd once again come down with the unfortunate mental affliction known as literalism, that worrying condition whose main symptom is an incurable tendency to take words and phrases at their face value. So if, for example, you see an advertisement for a stick deodorant, you immediately start wondering how many people suffer from smelly sticks. Or if someone happens to ask if you know a little woman who could run up some curtains for them. Well, your first reaction is to work out just how little such a woman would need to be. However, the good news that I bring victims of this worrying disability today is that all sorts of organisations are now being formed to fight it. There's WAL, for instance, Women Against Literalism, because all of their members have known the pure hell of living with a man who only ever responds to the literal meaning of everyday phrases. They quote, for example, the husband who suffered major injury by obeying one of his wife's instructions to the letter. It occurred in a restaurant when she said, "Don't turn round, but look who's just come in behind." Look, his collar blown. And among other case histories that are cited by members of the WAL, or Wallies as they're there's several examples of one tragic side effect of literalism, sometimes referred to as the "you didn't say" syndrome. As in, did you look in the oven to see if the casserole's all right? Yes, I looked in the oven. Is it all right? No, it's burning. Did you take it out? No. Why not? You didn't say. But besides WAL, there's also JAL, Journalists Against Literalism. Now, this is a group pledged to rid the British press of such bewildering headlines as the one that recently announced the entry of one of our leading record companies into the airline business, Virgin Expands, while CSAL represents Concerned Civil Servants dedicated to eradicating confusing public notices. You see, life's hard enough for us literalism sufferers without shops suddenly confronting us with a sign that says, "These premises are alarmed." or even, as hit me when I was in a resort on the south coast recently, a notice that announced shrimp teas, an expression which, to the literal-minded, can only mean something like plankton or algae, or whatever it is that shrimps have for tea. and what's equally welcome is the news that even the chairman of this programme, the respected Michael O'Donnell, has now joined the ranks of DAL, or Doctors Against Literalism. Now, admittedly, they still haven't managed to get literalism classified as one of the things you can claim for on Bupa, but at least they've now promised that as a profession they'll try to avoid such ambiguities as drink lots of fluids, as though there was anything else. Drink biscuits, And they'll also try to spare us literalists the kind of heart-stopping moment that I got recently when I read what was written on a bottle of pills I'd been prescribed. "Take one before going to bed," it said, which was easy enough. But then it went on, "and another one if you wake up." Fellow literalists, the good news is that any kind of phrase capable of misinterpretation is now getting the protection of a special interest group specifically recruited to take care of it, or to put that news in a rather more musical form, every literal meaning has a movement of its own.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Well, I see from the score sheet that Antonia and Dennis have won this week's Star Prize, which is a romantic trip for two to the Paris studio in the heart of London to compete against Dilys and Frank in our next programme. And until then, goodbye.
In My Word, Michael O'Donnell was in the chair. The questions were compiled by Peter Moore.